Well, hello, 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 hello. Are, are we live? Let's see. I believe we're live. Okay, hello. We're live. Sorry everyone, I got really exhausted. Yes. Okay, we're good. We're live. Yeah, I was setting up. I was just completely exhausted. I've been streaming all week. Okay, everyone. Let's see how many people we got watching here. Well, let's just get started, shall we? It's Sunday night. So, today's Sunday sermon is on sane occultism. All right, we're live. People are watching. We are taking a look at Sane Occultism by Dion Fortune. Hello, 93. Hello, hi. Yes, Jason had to take a nap. Wizard is tired. Oh, yes, I am beyond time. Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, people are starting to file in. Oh, Jason's still waking up. So before we get started, how's everyone doing? Everyone having a good Sunday? What's new? What up? Hi, Alex. Hi, Mr. Padrake. Hello, Phoenix. Hello, SB. Hello, John Newton. And hello, Slim Jim. And anyone who is still on the stream from earlier in the chat. Check it out. I'm a real streamer now. I have an Elgato Stream Deck. How exciting is that? I can queue this up with all my bullshit so that I can mess with the stream. Got a good workout in. Very good, Slim Jim. All right, we got 22 people on. So, who knows who on the stream? Mr. Padrake says been reading a book by Benabel Wen. I don't know much about that person. Who is that? I've heard the name many times. All right, so who on the stream is familiar with Dion Fortune? Here she is whiling out, looking like an extra in Midsommar. Greetings, Magic Crow. Anyone familiar with Dion Fortune? Very famous for writing the book Psychic Self-Defense, and she was a Golden Dawn initiate who is widely considered one of the most important magicians of the 20th century. Let's read a little bit about Dion Fortune. Born Violet Mary Firth in 1890. Phoenix is not familiar with Dion Fortune. Well, it's my pleasure to introduce you to an incredibly important writer. Mr. Padrake says, Ben Benwell writes about Taoism and magic. Okay. Is she Chinese? I seem to remember. Slim Jim says, just from what you've mentioned, but haven't read any of her material. Okay, well, it's my pleasure to introduce you to Dion Fortune, who is not just one of the most important occult writers ever, but also one of the most level-headed. Dion Fortune really took it upon herself to modernize the occultism of the Golden Dawn of her time, of Victorian England and Edwardian England, and modernize it with psychological teachings and Freudianism and all the things that were coming out at that time. And she did a great job of it. She was pretty much the first occult writer to, as far as I know, to pose the psychological model of magic, to say that magic is really just about working with the unconscious mind, with things that are already in the deep psychology of human beings. This was an incredibly important contribution to the occult sciences. And interestingly enough, Kenneth Grant, who hope some of you probably know, another very famous occult writer, Kenneth Grant I believe in the Magical Revival, says that at the initiation of the Aeon of Horus, Aleister Crowley initiated the higher self of mankind, Dion Fortune initiated the human self of mankind, and Austin Spare initiated the unconscious, or the primal atavisms of mankind. And I think there's some truth to that. So, Dion Fortune, from Wikipedia, was a British occultist, ceremonial magician, novelist, and author. She was a co-founder of the Fraternity of the Inner Light, an occult organization that promoted philosophies which she claimed had been taught to her by spiritual entities known as the Ascended Masters. A prolific writer, she produced a large number of articles and books on her occult ideas and also authored 7 novels, several of which expound occult themes. Fortune was born in Llandudno, Caernarfonshire, North Wales. How's my Welsh for you? Although little is known of her early life. By her teenage years, she was living in England's West Country, where she wrote 2 books of poetry. After time spent at a horticultural college, she began studying psychology and psychoanalysis at the University of London, where I also went to school, before working as a counselor in a psychotherapy clinic. During the First World War, she joined the Women's Land Army and established a company selling soy milk products. By the way, little known fact, Dion Fortune is the person that introduced soy to the Western diet and tofu. So if you ever meet a soy boy, you can thank Dion Fortune. She became interested in esotericism through the teachings of a Theosophical Society before joining an occult lodge led by Theodore Moriarty, and then the Alpha and Omega occult organization that was one of the lodges of the Golden Dawn. Let's see. She came to believe that she was being contacted by 2 ascended masters, the Master Rakosi and the Master Jesus, and underwent transmediumship to channel the master's messages. In 1922, Fortune and Charles Loveday claimed that during one of these ceremonies, they were contacted by masters who provided them with a text, the Cosmic Doctrine. Although she became the president of the Christian Mystic Lodge of the Theosophical Society, she believed the society to be uninterested in Christianity and split from it to form the Community of the Inner Light, a group later renamed the Fraternity of the Inner Light. Okay. With Loveday, she established bases in both Glastonbury and Bayswater, London, where I also lived right next to there, began issuing a magazine, gave public lectures, and promoted the growth of their society. During World War II, she organized a project of meditations and visualizations designed to protect Britain. She began planning for what she believed was a coming post-war Age of Aquarius, although she died of leukemia shortly after the war's end. So, okay, we got almost 50 viewers. What's up? Some of you may know of the Magical Battle of Britain. In my opinion, World War II was when the Western magical tradition ended, and we're doing our best to bring it back. What do I mean by that? In order to stop Hitler, primarily Dion Fortune and Aleister Crowley, and also Austin Spare, along with probably a lot of other people, participated in constant magical rituals to push back the German war effort. Almost all of them were dead following the war. Connected? I don't know. Causation, correlation, probably shouldn't go there. But one way or another, the biggest leaders of the Western magical tradition were taken out by World War II. Much like most of the biggest leaders of the late 20th century were taken out by 9/11 and the psychic shock that emanated therefrom, leaving only yours truly at the age of 21 to pick up the pieces. Well, here we are. We had some false starts at restarting the Western esoteric tradition. In the 20th century, we had Grady McMurtry's OTO. Well, previous to that, we had Jack Parsons, who blew out due to his own ego failings, unfortunately. And following on from Parsons, we had Grady McMurtry, who resurrected what used to be called the Caliphate OTO, and now is just called the OTO. And that's actually been fairly stable. It's definitely got its problems, but props to the OTO. They've kept it stable. They've kept the organization running. But in terms of huge cultural movers and shakers like Crowley and Fortune of that caliber, well, it's been a little bit sparse since. Let's see, comments. Eyeball, hello, says longtime fan viewer student, first time virtual interlocutor. What's up? Eliphaz Leviathan says Kenneth Grant was onto something, maybe, yeah. Sometimes, yeah. Mystical Kabbalah is invaluable, definitely. SB asked, do you think those rituals made any effect? I don't know, but sure, why not? Yeah, Eliphaz Leviathan says, well, Lon Milo Duquette, he's done some great work in there. Yeah, Lon Milo is great. I, of course, consistently refer to Lon Milo Duquette as the best current teacher of the Western esoteric tradition, and he's part of McMurtry's OTO, right? I think he was actually initiated by McMurtry. Grant Morrison, yeah, Grant Morrison is great. I don't necessarily consider Grant fully a Western esoteric tradition person. He's kind of on his own thing. But yeah, we've had lots of great teachers, writers, and sense. But in terms of having like a full-on movement, the tidal wave largely ended in World War II. But that's probably true of a lot of things. World War I also ended cultural movements across Europe. It's not just the occult, right? And then for decades following, people were simply left picking up the pieces. Also true of 9/11. So that's a little bit of a preamble. I'm surprised more people don't know about Dion Fortune. She should be read by all students of Western magic. She's as important, or almost as important, as Crowley. And the only reason I say almost is because a lot of her work is going off of Crowley's notes, like 777. But they're the two most important initiates of the Golden Dawn. So in this book, a little bit of a caveat with Dion Fortune. Not all of her stuff has aged well. I did an episode on the Mystical Kabbalah with Mickey Pellerano, where we were reassessing the book, and there was frankly a lot of racist stuff in there. There was a lot of attitudes that were very much of the time that are no longer considered acceptable, and that's quite unfortunate. So I don't think there's anything like that in here, but if there is, we will deal with it when we get to it. But that aside, her work on putting the occult on a rational psychological basis is invaluable. So I'm just going to go for this. I'm going to read you a couple passages for your Sunday service. And we have a super chat going. We'll see how long it goes. I'm starting to wake up again now that I'm having my tea. We'll see what people think. We'll see if you like it or not. We have a super chat going. And let's say, I don't exactly have a goal for it, but let's say $5 or more super chat. You can suggest something for me to read on the stream. Okay, so let's start off with chapter 1. That was just for dramatic effect. What is occultism? Let's see, let's get D unfortunate. Yes, thank you. Very good. Very few of those who are interested in occultism pause to ask themselves what occultism really is. They may know that the word occult means hidden, and that esoteric, which is often used as its synonym, means for the few. If they put the two together, they may conclude, and rightly, that occult science is really a branch of knowledge which is hidden from the many and reserved for the few. An immense mass of verbiage has gathered around the sacred science since Madame Blavatsky drew back the curtain of the sanctuary, and the Theosophical Society sought to popularize the ancient mystery teaching. Imagination, freed from the bonds of proof, has had free rein, and scoffers have found ample material that was legitimate game for their comments. Just as true today, if not more true, because of the internet. She's correctly identifying theosophy, I think, as a source of inspiration for many, and it did, objectively speaking, start the modern occult revival. But theosophy also is full of gibberish, and also gave us a lot of New Age gibberish, and started kind of the genre of channel gibberish that we have to deal with. And so the thing about magic is very precise. It's a very precise set of activities, and it's a very methodical process that has been documented for hundreds, if not thousands of years, But because our culture largely discounts it, it gives people a license to go hog wild and say whatever the hell they want about it. So it's a mess. There's not peer review in magic. Because it's not scientific, although it can be taken on an empirical basis. The pseudo-occultism of the present day, with its dubious psychism, wild theorizing, and evidence that cannot stand up to the most cursory examination, is but the detritus which accumulates around the base of the Mount of Vision. Very true. Done to great effect by Jodorowsky in The Holy Mountain. All such worthless rubbish is not worth the powder and shot of argument. In order to form a just estimate of the sacred science, we must study originals, and try to penetrate the minds of the great mystics and Illuminati, whose works bear evidence of first-hand knowledge of the supersensible worlds. Leaving aside all theories and dogmatic teaching, we find a consensus of agreement on certain matters of experience. There are states of consciousness which transcend the normal, and when these states prevail, we can discern forms of existence with which normally we have no contact. All the seers are agreed on this point, and we may take it as being the fundamental experience from which occult science is derived. There are universal traditions concerning superhuman beings who taught occult science to the remote ancestors of the races and founded their civilization. These statements, however, being unverifiable, according to the accepted rules of evidence, will be put aside for the purpose of the present discussion. Let us then concede, as we cannot very well deny in face of the available evidence, that the supernormal faculties of the human mind open up to man a supernatural range of experience. It is the cumulative supernatural experience of the ages perceived by means of the supernormal faculties sporadically developed in mankind that forms the subject matter of occult science and the data for its speculations. It is the sporadic development of the supernormal faculties, however, that makes evidential proof a difficulty. Natural science lays its evidence before the 5 physical senses possessed by every normal human being. Occult science makes it appeal to the judgment of senses, but rarely to be found developed in human beings. The average man has to base his opinion in occult matters upon circumstantial evidence. Occult science, like classical music, reserves itself for the few whose training and natural gifts enable them to appreciate it. The Philistine is unapproachable because there is no common standpoint from which a start can be made. In these latter days, however, there is a widespread occurrence of minor degrees of psychism. Definitely true. Thank you, Howard. What's up? Just always coming in strong with the super chats. Sup, love Holy Mountain and Psycho Magic by him. Me too. Thank you very much. In these latter days, however, there is a widespread occurrence of minor degrees of psychism. This is true. I don't want to quite say psychic powers, but psychic faculties are commonplace throughout all of humanity, and always have been. C, coming in strong again. $5 super chat, Corpus Hermeticum. Love it. Thank you very much. The path of magic is, I don't want to say above, but it's so much more fine and subtle and past that. It has very little to do with psychism, new thought, any of that. All that stuff is great, but those are phenomenon attendant upon the sphere of Yasod, essentially, or Hod in the case of new thought, that are simply common day phenomenon of the lower spheres of consciousness, whereas magic is concerned with ascending the entire tree. So this is very common that people mistake the two. Many people have had experiences which have set them thinking and asking questions. They have glimpsed something outside the 4 walls of our everyday life, and they are no longer contented with the statement that nothing exists save that which we habitually see. In their quest, they may follow the line of experimental research, as the spiritualists have done, unearthing, in the course of their work, a vast mass of phenomena of the supersensible states of existence. Or, following another line of advance, they may ask their questions of those who go to tradition for their explanation. Until one studies the literature of the subject, one is utterly unaware of its extent. Yeah, that's definitely true. It reaches from the oral traditions on the one hand, through the mythologies developed and systematized in the ancient literatures, to the writings of highly trained philosophers whose speculations led them beyond our bourne of time and space. Definitely true. I think she puts it really well there. She is talking about an oral tradition that goes back to the dawn of humanity throughout all human mythology and ancient philosophy. The philosophers that are highly trained. I think that's very, very good description of the scope of some of what we're talking about. Howard says Manly P. Hall's Secret Traditions is also superb. Yeah, Manly P. Hall, definitely not exactly practical, but more on the philosophical side. People are like the Red Book. I've never actually read the Red Book. I don't know Castle in the Forest, but Eyeball asks, where do theosophical root race concepts depart from Hindu ideas, myths, and what might be real or not with respect to what we consider races now, great chain of being, etc.? So the theosophical idea of root races is now widely considered at least pseudo-racist. I don't necessarily think they were meant that way at the time, but there are groups who have certainly taken them that way. As far as where theosophy diverges from Hinduism, well, I'll give you this. Mahatma Gandhi was a theosophist in his early days as a law student in England. And his response to theosophy was, well, I'm just going to go back to Hinduism because Hinduism is more precise and contains a wider set of ideas. And I think he was right about that. Have been far more interested in just standard Hinduism in my life than theosophical channelings. You know, here's the thing about theosophy, right? Theosophy was based on the idea of channeled messages from ascended masters, and in many cases Tibetans, right? Well, it's like these days you can go meet Tibetans, right? They're actual people that are actual human beings, not ascended masters, you know. All right. It must, however, always be kept in mind that occultism is more than a philosophy or science. It is a vast range of experience, and it is this body of experience that its speculations seek to systematize and explain. We can define occultism as an extension of psychology, for it studies certain little-known aspects of the human mind and the mind side of nature. Its findings, rightly formulated and understood, fit in with what is already established in psychology and natural science. This mutual corroboration must be the test of occult science. There must be no discrepancies between its findings and those of natural science upon such points as natural science is in a position to test. We must no longer content ourselves with wild statements of psychic experiences, in proof of which no shadow of independent evidence can be offered. We must realize that if we are dealing with genuine phenomena, they will bear investigation. In seeking to investigate these little-known aspects of the mind, let us remember that they have their technique, and unless we are prepared to observe that technique, we will no more obtain accurate results than we should if the object of our study were bacteriology. Occultism, however, is more than a science to be pursued objectively. It provides also a philosophy of life derived from its experiences, and it is this philosophical or even religious aspect that attracts most of those who devote their lives to it. Out of experience of the rare states of consciousness which it studies comes out of experience of the rare states of consciousness which it studies comes a greatly changed attitude towards revealed religion. For the seeker has now penetrated to the planes whence the revelations come, and for him they have an entirely different significance and validity. He is no longer dependent upon faith. He has had personal experience, and out of that experience he tends to formulate a religious belief in which he himself aspires to share in the work usually assigned to saints and angels as the ministers and messengers of God. From time immemorial, the training and teaching of specially selected individuals have gone on with that end in view, and the schools dedicated to that work are known as the mystery schools, or Magic.me, which is an outer college of an outer college of an outer college of the mystery schools. Experience of the rarer forms of natural phenomena brings the conviction that their influences, in a subtle and little understood fashion, affect normal human life very much more than is realized, especially in the spheres of disease and therapeutics. But in addition to their teaching concerning the nature of the invisible planes of existence, the mystery schools teach the great fundamental doctrine of reincarnation, that is to say, the oscillation of the soul between the seen and the unseen. This is a concept which changes our entire attitude towards life, and on this point, occultism is not only a philosophy, but a system of ethics. To the man or woman dissatisfied with the conventional explanations of a philosophy and a science limited to the evidence of the 5 physical senses, occultism opens a rich vein of ore to be had for the working. Its speculations throw light upon every aspect of life. They explain much that, considered only from the mundane aspect, is inexplicable. And they place religion upon a basis of experience, not of blind belief, which, by the way, is why religious people tend to hate the occult. Not because it gets people further away from God, but because it gets them closer to a spiritual experience without the need for a priesthood. Those are the gifts that are available for men through the opening of the mysteries, an opening which has been going on for the last 50 years. Till now, the doors stand wide and beams of light shine out from within. So that's the first chapter. Let's see what people have said in the comments. Glad you like my clickbait, Ryan. Howard says, I do believe in theosophy. Okay. Ryan says, the nature of us is in fact magical. Yeah. Howard says, nature is shape, angle, geometry. Yes, Lucas, I'm reading Sane Occultism by Dion Fortune. Wingsbound says, phenomena don't always repeat. No, that's quite correct. Magical phenomenon are largely untestable by scientific methods outside of the physical ones. Things like meditation, pranayama, mindfulness, all of that is very testable. Psychic research, I'm not the person to ask about psychic research. I know Mitch Horowitz has done a lot of investigation of it, and there is a lot of positive stuff there, but I don't know too much about it. But the thing about magic is it's much closer to art in that it is largely subjective and personal and not objective. That said, there are objective methods, such as meditation and ritual, to prompt subjective experiences, but the experiences that are prompted are human internal experiences. So those are quite difficult to quantify in any way whatsoever. But that's a very perceptive comment, and that is why magic tends to be dismissed. One reason. Form is sound, vibration, frequency. Yeah. Ryan says people usually are hooked by whatever tickles their ego, pride, insecurity, pain, or striving. Yes. Wing says Dion Fortune was inspired. Okay. Ryan says little realizing that all those groups or whatever all pull from the same nature. Yeah. In philosophy, you got to break down the meaning and nature of the words and names before you can determine nature. Oh yeah, Wingsbound says, oh yes, 2 months of pranayama devotion woke me right up in many ways. That's great. Good job. Congratulations. That he or she, I'm not sure what your gender is. Wingsbound is correct. 2 months of pranayama will change your life. Two days of pranayama or 2 weeks will change your life, but 2 months is great. And you are hyperoxygenating your brain. That is tangible and physically measurable. Jesse says, Theosophy got me into it, sort of. To be honest, it was mostly chemistry that got me into alchemy, and that led to Hermeticism. That's interesting. Ryan says, very testable. Just pick up a breathing practice. Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point, Ryan. Just pick up, you know what? Just do pranayama or holotropic breath work or some other deep breathing exercise, and you will see how malleable consciousness is. Let me just put it that way. How malleable consciousness is. Howard says, could we measure magic with electromagnetic sci-fi tech possibly? Well, we do have the Muse headset. We do have headsets, wearable headsets now that can measure brain waves. So that's pretty cool. All right, let's get to chapter 2. Is occultism worthwhile? What do you think? Sound off in the comments. Is occultism worthwhile? Whatever path in life a man may have chosen for himself or have had forced upon him, there comes a time when he looks back and asks himself whether it has been worthwhile. When he looks ahead and asks himself whether it is right to go on, or had he better say mea culpa and retrace his steps. The more sincere he is, the more faithful he is to the highest he knows. The oftener will come the heart-searching, which is the highest tribute to truth, a tribute infinitely higher than belief or sacrifice. It has nothing in common with the wavering, which is the product of a lack of stamina, nor the abandonment of principles, which comes in the absence of real convictions. It is not the product of weakness, but of strength, a strength that can make one heap of all its winnings and stake it on one turn of pitch and toss. I think that's Rudyard Kipling, but correct me if I'm wrong. Of an integrity which really believes that there is no religion higher than truth. That's Theosophy's motto, and is prepared to face martyrdom for it. Even that hardest of martyrdoms, which is received in the house of one's friends. That is a hard one. That which remains after such an acid test of intellectual honesty may indeed be ranked as pure gold, and it is such gold, bought at such a price, that is the standard of value for our human life on this globe. By it, every attainment and revelation must be tested in our limited and relative world. It is the Word made flesh among us. Those of us who have chosen the path of occultism are even more in need of self-criticism than most people. Yeah, for we have chosen for our study a subject in which there is no standard of criticism, and in which each is a law unto himself, claiming, if he be so minded, independent revelation from sources beyond the judgment of human reason, a possession as unsatisfactory as a private printing press for banknotes. You can see some of the influence on her writing style from Crowley with the similes. This is worth pointing out. This has been a sea change in magic, where prior to, let's say, the 1950s, during the Theosophical and Thelemic period, a lot of occult stuff was based on channeled writings or channeled messages from supposed masters, right? I'm not discounting that at all. I think that stuff is fascinating. I point out historically that following the 60s occult revival, when people got acid, people became much less interested in that idea and much more interested in more pragmatic descriptions of magic, I think. And also, and then as time went on, particularly when we got the internet, the question is like, what is the source of validity for your practices? At this time, it was a-channeled writing. In the 60s and 70s, it was, and earlier, people started to get into this idea of unbroken lineage. I have a lineage back to the burning times. And then in the 80s, it was chaos magic, so the idea was you don't need a source of legitimacy. But then with the internet and onward, the question of legitimacy became a much more academic question of what is the academic validity of what you're doing, because we started to get much better sources. Okay. We know that revelations, or more truly, realizations, come to human consciousness, just as we know that banknotes are legal tender. But we must never forget that revelations and banknotes further resemble each other, and that they have no value unless they represent actualities. For a banknote to have value, it must be redeemable in gold at any moment. For a revelation to have value, it must be valid in a spiritual crisis. I'm going to read that again. For a revelation to have value, it must be valid in a spiritual crisis. Self-questionings are like a trial balance, which enables the banker to estimate his solvency. He does not wait for a run on the bank to prove whether his gold reserve is equal to his note issue. Yeah, very inspired by Crowley's writing style. The revelations, the secret traditional wisdom that never gets tested by impartial criticism, the unknown powers, all the mystery and imaginings that constitute occult science badly need such a periodical trial balance if they are to maintain any semblance of solvency. When we look back upon the history of occult science, the outlook is not encouraging. Why is it that occultism has produced such a crop of charlatans and few, if any, intellects of the first water? The grandeur of its theories ennobles human life and enables us to see our fate and acts in a perspective related to the cosmos. But is that glorious background interstellar space or painted canvas? There is only one test, to walk straight up to it and see whether the stones of the path are beneath one's feet, or if one has simply torn one's way into the sordid back premises of a theater. Speaking for myself, I essayed that experiment upon my first introduction to occult science. In brilliant colors, books, lectures, and personal talks, depicted occult arts and astral phenomena in a cosmogony of the type of the elephant who stood upon a tortoise, and I saw at the first glance that I was dealing with painted cloth, and put my foot through it to show my opinion of it. This is a common experience with all serious students. Then I used my knowledge of psychology to enable me to go behind the scenes and penetrate into the minds and motives of those who were staging the puppet show I had been invited to witness. I saw the wires that supported the fairies and the machine that enabled the god to appear at the critical moment, the manager with one eye on the box office, the author with a much revised manuscript, the producer in consultation with the stage carpenter and limelight man, the actors trying to synthesize their egos and their parts. Yeah, as they said, if you want to enjoy something, never ask how the sausage is made. Then I penetrated deeper behind the scenes of the theater. I saw the different esoteric schools as dressing rooms in which the actors made up for their parts. I discovered the dirty and drafty stone stairway by which they entered the theater, and I descended it. I issued forth by the stage door into the sordid purlieus of Theaterland, where men and women fought outside gin palaces, and children sprawled in the dirt of the gutter, and there, lifting my eyes for relief from the sordidness of it all, I saw above me the very stars in their remote and shining reality that had been depicted upon the painted scenery of the theater. Then and then only did I see the significance of the drama and realize that it was not an attempt to deceive, but to portray. And I was glad to go in humility and gratitude to the front entrance and pay the price of a seat that I might watch the interpretation of life that was being represented therein. I had had my lesson and learned the function and limitation of a school of initiation. This is completely on point. This is great. So what she's saying here, consider something like the OTO. You go to the OTO and you see a bunch of people do a ritual. And you're like, literally, what is the magic in that? It's tacky. It's cheesy. You know, the people very often in occult groups can be very ordinary, can have nothing special about them. And it can be a total letdown. You go expecting some type of high initiates, and that includes the initiations and all of that, until you realize that they are trying to depict. And remember, most of secret societies come from before the age of television and even the age of radio. At the turn of the 20th century, most of America was in some form of fraternal or pseudo-Masonic society. So this was a form of media at that time, stage plays that people participate in. So much like with magic itself, you play act something to try to get it to happen in reality. It's the same with magical orders. They play act initiation to give you the vibe, to give you a sense of what it's like, but it's just training wheels. So once you understand that, then you don't have to have a chip on your shoulder about this stuff. You don't need to be disappointed when the glitter rubs off, because you realize that you're dealing with the signifier, not the signified. You're dealing with the signifier, not the signified. So let me read that again. Then and only then did I see the significance of the drama and realize that it was not an attempt to deceive, but to portray. And I was glad to go in humility and gratitude to the front entrance and pay the price of a seat that I might watch the interpretation of life that was being represented therein. I had had my lesson and learnt the function and limitation of a school of initiation. We have to distinguish between the symbolic expression of abstract ideas and the actual delineation of concrete objects. It is said of the mysteries that the candidate was led on from degree to degree and shown more and more recondite symbols of the Godhead, and at the end, when the final curtain was drawn aside, was revealed to him an empty shrine, and a voice whispered in his ear, "There is no God." Whoever has penetrated behind the drop scene, which is also the veil of the temple, knows this to be true. There is no God of Israel to fight for him in battle and snuff up the savor of burnt offerings. But there is a Logos, and the nature of the Logos can only be apprehended by those who can meditate in an empty shrine. There is a logos, and the nature of the logos can only be apprehended by those who can meditate in an empty shrine, or, as Bertrand Russell said it, yes, thank God, I am an atheist. The training of the degrees is designed to teach the mind to rise to the abstract and transcend thought, for it is only when thought ceases that apprehension begins. It is only when thought ceases that apprehension begins. No one can teach occult science who is not able to draw aside the curtain and reveal the empty shrine, who does not know that the occult doctrines are a system of algebra that enables the mind to function beyond the range of thought. Whoever thinks that the planes and the rays and the hierarchy exist in time and space is not an initiate and therefore cannot be an initiator. The difference between the occultaster and the occultist is that the former believes that the innermost shrine contains the God, and the latter knows that the God is within him. The former believes in revelation, and the latter in realization. The former believes in a special message to himself from his master, a special mandate from heaven. The latter knows that in God we live and move and have our being. The former believes in the astral plane as objective reality. The latter knows it to be objective imagination, something we will be exploring quite a bit in the upcoming Adept Initiative 2 course. This does not mean, however, that the astral plane is non-existent, but it does mean that it is the psychology of the objective imagination, which is the true study of the practical occultist. This brings us back to the point from which we started. Is occultism worthwhile? It is just as much and as little worthwhile as mathematics, to which it is precisely analogous. Thank you, Alex. Got a $5 super chat. This is a great reading. I'm imagining I stumbled in the middle of occult college class. Well, wonderful. That's what we're trying to do here. This is the open occult university for the people on YouTube. This is the occult school we all wanted. I'm doing my best as one guy in the middle of nowhere to build the invisible college, that temple not made with hands, out of the substance of nothing. The mathematician neither bakes a loaf nor digs a field, but his science is the fundamental basis of knowledge, to whose terms all things must be reduced for final and accurate expression. What mathematics are to matter and force, occult science is to life and consciousness. There is possible no final expression or synthesis without the use of its peculiar methods. Therefore, I maintain that it is worthwhile, and am satisfied that the time I have spent in its pursuit has not been wasted. But, on the other hand, I maintain that some occult systems I have met with are not worthwhile. Oh my God. Sounds judgmental. Sounds like something Jason Louv would say on his YouTube. Though an initiatory system may justly be... By the way, you will know people by their insistence on... When people start saying that everything is the same, all magical systems are the same, there is no hierarchy in truth, you will know they are full of shit. Because anyone who is actually... as she is outlining here, if you have actually experienced the thing, then you know what the thing is and what it isn't. And you know when people are bullshitting and when they're not. But if you've never actually experienced it, then all you can do is bullshit. 80+% of the people who talk about magic online. Though an initiatory system may justly be likened to a theater, the teaching it conveys may not only be likened to such a play as Hamlet, but to such another as Sweeney Todd, the demon barber of Fleet Street. People who would sit enthralled through one of these plays would walk out in the first act of the other. 90% of the books on occultism are conceived in the spirit and written in the manner of the penny gap. Okay, so she's actually more cynical than me. She says 90%, not 80%. 90% of the books on occultism are conceived in the spirit and written in the manner of the penny gaff. They offend the taste of any educated person. As long as the occult doctrines are presented in such a guise, they can never command the respect of those whose respect is worth having. There must always, it is true, be milk for babes and strong meat for strong men, but there is no need to accept silliness for simplicity, or intellectual confusion for profound wisdom. Large chunks of unverified and unverifiable statements and a thick treacly smear of sentimental humanitarianism are the mixture from which all too many esoteric books are compounded, and they make one ashamed to call oneself an occultist, Well, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Yeah, once you start encountering just like slop, as she says, it's sentimental humanitarianism, just sloppy. We're all one, love everyone. It's just like, okay, you have nothing. You have nothing. Such a book as The Ancient Wisdom commands respect as a literary production, even from those who do not accept its conclusions. But some of the utterances that have been given to the world in the name of occult science are simply in execrable taste and would disgrace a patent medicine. We must remember that the sacred science only exists on this plane of consciousness of its students. We must remember that the sacred science only exists on this plane in the consciousness of its students. Cosmic law and occult doctrine, as we know them, are only human conceptions of that which transcends any powers of direct perception possessed by the incarnated ego, and can be no more than an approximation, an attempt to conceive with the aid of a symbol that which in itself is unthinkable. There is no royal road to initiation, but only the path worn by many wandering feet. Up this we may struggle as best we may, with for our guide none other than our highest realization. And if the light that is in us be darkness, how great is that darkness? An order or fraternity upon the physical plane is what we make it. The masters upon the astral planes are what we conceive them to be. It is only through human consciousness that spirit can work upon the plane of matter. The astral plane is simply thought into existence and thought out of existence by the composite imagination of the globe. There we go. There's Alan Moore's entire career in half of a sentence. The astral plane is simply thought into existence and thought out of existence by the composite imagination of the globe. And we are freed from its dominion when we realize its subjective nature. Occult science, rightly understood, teaches us to regard all things as states of consciousness, and then shows us how to gain control of consciousness subjectively, which control, once acquired, is soon reflected objectively. By means of this conscious control, we are able to manipulate the plane of the human mind. It is a power that is neither good nor evil in itself, but only as it is used. The initiate of the right-hand path, dedicated to the service of God, conceives that it should be used solely for the purpose of bringing human consciousness to an awareness of God, in all that that implies when understood in its fullest significance. He uses his knowledge of the mind to make it the instrument of the spirit, in contradistinction to the initiate of the left-hand path, who uses his knowledge of the mind to make it the servant of his passions. Occultism can never be an end in itself, nor a mere satisfaction of intellectual curiosity, but the most potent weapon in the hands of the intellect. Is it worthwhile for men of goodwill to learn to handle this terrible two-edged sword? A metaphor later used by Jack Parsons. It is not only worthwhile, but essential for the safety of the race, for so many men of ill will have learnt to handle it. There you are. So there's my whole career in one sentence. Me, the esoteric cop who never signed up for it. It is not only worthwhile, but essential for the safety of the race, for so many men of ill will have learnt to handle it. Yes, and those men's heads are going on pikes on a regular basis on this channel and throughout my social media. Thank you very much, Sorer Dion Fortune. I'm working on it. When one sees what can be done by the misuse of the knowledge of the hidden side of things, one feels that no sacrifice is too great, no risk too dangerous, to enable one to stand in the breach between the powers of darkness and their innocent victims. Correct. Therefore, you wonder why I get involved in things like declaring fatwas on entire religions. Therefore, it is that there will always be found souls who will think it worthwhile to make the great sacrifice, which is initiation. And it is a sacrifice. Absolutely. It is a sacrifice of everything. I could have been anything. Therefore, it is that there will always be found souls who will think it worthwhile to make the great sacrifice, which is initiation, and to offer the dedication of the self to the service of the powers of light, in order that these powers may be able to manifest on the planes of form through the channel which the human consciousness can open to them. So this is quite interesting. So that's the end of the second chapter. She's saying, so if I had read this when I was 20, 21, Chaos Magician. I simply would have discounted it. Like, whatever. This is old theosophical garbage. Now I've lived it. Now I know she's telling the truth. Let me read it again. I've lived this for the last 20 years. When one sees what can be done by the misuse, and by the way, she talks about initiation. Initiation is not the same as popular occultism. What people think of as magic is dabbling, occult tasting, as she says it, or they are, as Stephen Flowers later put it, occultniks. Initiation is forced on you by the universe. When one sees what can be done by the misuse of the knowledge of the hidden side of things, one feels that no sacrifice is too great, no risk too dangerous to enable one to stand in the breach between the powers of darkness and their innocent victims. Let me make this more real. Voodoo is involved. There are human trafficking networks that traffic tens to hundreds of thousands of children every year that are within the Voodoo religion. You can go to Jason Louv's Hurt Locker on Medium and find out all about it. I'm going to do a YouTube episode about it. So this is not idle. It's not talking about like, my pervasive forces of darkness. This is very real. Or think about jihadis, or think about the murderousness of the Church of Scientology. These are powers and principalities of darkness. When one sees what, and no one even sees them unless they're as fucked up as I am, usually. It requires an initiate to see these things clearly because they're so far outside of human like let's just say human traffickers in Voodoo, for instance. They're operating in a reality so far out of the frame of reference of the standard Westerner, liberal or conservative, that people can't even see them, and they rely on that in order to continue to perpetuate their evil. So that's why when you get a guy like me who sees it and calls it out, people are like, it sounds crazy, right? But as I said, initiation's a sacrifice. Let me read this last paragraph again, and then I'll take comments. When one sees what can be done by the misuse of the knowledge of the hidden side of things, one feels that no sacrifice is too great, no risk too dangerous to enable one to stand in the breach between the powers of darkness and their innocent victims. Therefore, it is that there will always be found souls who will think it worthwhile to make the great sacrifice, which is initiation, and to offer the dedication of the self to the service of the powers of light, in order that these powers may be able to manifest on the planes of form through the channel which the human consciousness can open to them. She's speaking objectively. This is true, but it cannot be perceived by those who have not experienced it. Okay. Let me take comments. Oh, there's a lot of comments. Okay, I'm not going to read everything. There's so many comments. I'm just gonna take out a few. Lucas says, magic doesn't imply a theory of the universe, which contrasts with the one contemporary scientific consensus presents us with. Not if you're doing it right. If you're doing it right, you should be taking on everything science gives you, because science describes the physical world. Magic describes the subjectivity of consciousness. Eliphaz Levy says, I wonder if you could accelerate the effects of pranayama using methylene blue. I've experimented with methylene blue. I find it interesting, although it hikes blood pressure. That's worth a why. I'm curious, though, why would that affect pranayama? I'm curious. Mr. Padrake says, the LBRP and pranayama helped you work through PTSD. That's great. That's great. I mean, what more can you ask for, really? When you come down to the practical, yeah. Howard says magic is more about the imaginary universe bleeding into our physical universe through our consciousness and spirit. Yeah. Eyeball says occultism is an organic function of the discourse from cognitive linguistic mammals. Phonetic alphabets ask no less than some occlusion. Lucas is talking about a rift between Theosophy and Thelema. Well, they were never joined. There was always a rift. Crowley constantly made fun of them by calling himself the Master Therion, which was a riff on the Theosophists talking about ascended masters, like the Master Hilarion and things like this. But they were never joined, and Theosophists still They consider Crowley to be Voldemort, basically. But his material is of such higher quality than theirs. Luke says, Crowley and Steiner had exactly the same vision of the universe's workings. Could you elaborate on that? Where are you drawing that from? Jesse says, is this woman writing about DMT fairies? That's pretty funny. No, actually, during the Victorian time, at the turn of the century, there was a very famous fraud that was committed where people, that even Arthur Conan Doyle, who wrote Sherlock Holmes, was caught up in, Lady Coddington's Fairies, where this woman was using trick photography, double exposure photography, to make it look like she'd taken photos of fairies in her yard, and all these otherwise intelligent people believed it. So I think that's what she's talking about. But it's actually hilarious to to update it for the modern day and think about DMT fairies, which people have made altogether too much of. Lucas says, I think there's been a political interest in making Thelema more and more relativist and aligned to mainstream science at the same time. I don't know what's happening with Thelema now, but Thelema, as it is currently practiced, it departed quite significantly from what Crowley wrote. And there's a guy I like, IAO 131, who writes quite a lot about this. I don't know where they're off to with it. But it's for that reason that the Thelemic corpus was written down and said to be unalterable, because this happens with any religion. People will twist it and distort it. So the good thing about Thelema that Crowley saw ahead is we have the documents, so we don't need to rely on either him and his personality at all, because he was a severely flawed individual. We don't need to rely on him or any type of spiritual dispensation from him. Although I am the closest initiatory link to Aleister Crowley in North America, it doesn't matter. That plus, we don't need to rely on any ecclesiastical authority, priesthood, modern organization. We have the material and we can do the experiments ourselves. And it was written like that on purpose. And that's powerful stuff. Data Adept says, I have badass T2 vibes. Okay, I'll take it. Thank you. The more ordinary someone is, the more intrigued I am by them. Okay. Let's see. Vox Vespro says, James Wasserman called our local lodge a repertory theater group. Man, I wish I'd met Jim Wasserman. I really do. I really do. Oh yeah, people are getting deep in the comments here. Temple says, the fact that stars turn into planets, which turn into plants, which turn into humans with mouths is wild and magical as fuck to me. Yeah. Hockey teams have the best logos. Lucas says, you disagree with Dion Fortune? Okay, cool. Why? Average occult enjoyer. Yeah, C says, if only religious classes touched on occult and ceremonial magical theory. Yeah, they never will. Let's see. Truth is all that matters. Yeah. Lucas says, but you totally agree with Dion Fortune when she says that not all magical systems are equivalent. Yeah. Howard says, I wonder what Dion Fortune says and thinks about chaos magic. Well, she died a good 25 years before it was created, but I think that occultists of her generation, and including her magical order, the Society of Inner Light, and also the Thelemites like Phyllis Seckler, I think were pretty horrified by it because they felt that people were misusing magic and were going to ruin their lives. And there's quite a bit of truth and validity to that. Now, I am a chaos magician. I think the chaos magical approach is a very... actually, I tend to look at chaos magic as a good entry point to the occult. I think it's a better entry point than Thelema, but it will only take you so far. Fox says, reread her stuff knowing she's a goat in sheep's clothing. That's a compliment. Yes. Okay, talking about egregores. Lots of interesting stuff in the comments. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, Vox mentions Crowley. So, so for those who have not caught up, I'm reading Sane Occultism by Dion Fortune, Kant, Yes. I lost the thread. Okay. Abraham's kids are all soul pirates. Well, yes and no. It depends on the person. Mr. Padrake says, Ebony Anpu used to constantly tell me the initiation is not for you, but your angel. Wow, you knew Ebony Anpu. Damn, that's taken me back. That's old school occult. That's wild. I'd like to know more about that. Wow. It took me years of practice and often falling on my face before I understood and finally initiated. That's really interesting. Request to stream the game Fear and Hunger. I haven't heard of it. All right. Howard says weed and pranayama. Someone I met says that's a good idea. Is shamanism the source of it all? Yes, it is. Okay. There's so many comments here. Oh, Eliphaz Levy says methylene blue can increase the amount of oxygen that tissues take in. No shit. Well, tell you what. I'm going to try that tonight and see how it goes. Wingsbound says soul fragmentation and a kind of consciousness dissolution. Voodoo uses a lot of things like tetrodotoxin and scopolamine to keep people delirious too. Yeah, well, that's in the case of making zombies, which is we're going to talk about that on stream too. Steiner, no thanks. I tend to feel the same. I had an astronomy professor who was into Steiner. I think he had mercury poisoning. Okay, so all right, there's a ton. So just, there's no way I can answer all these comments, but Mr. Padrake says Ebony was my mentor and friend. Well, how lucky this is. I feel very, I will say this. I'm having people show up to these streams who are long-term occult students. Like, if you're saying that your mentor was Ebony Anpu or your mentor was Jim Wasserman, like, yeah, you know your stuff. And I'm just honored that you're here on this stream because I'm obviously a lot younger than those guys. And these were the people who were like a big deal when I was coming up. So it warms my heart that people are here and that we're actually connected to the tradition here. Very cool. All right, let's go to chapter 3. And it's just like it makes me feel good when people mention these things because so much of this stuff is lost. It really, I mean, within a generation, people may not remember any of us. And we will only have our own attainments to fall back on for whatever that's worth. But, it's always weighed on, particularly the early part of my career in my 20s. So much of my effort went into preserving what had happened before. So the Psychic Bible, things like that, Ultra Culture Journal, because when you get high initiates, whether you've met them or not in real life, when you get high initiates, often they're completely unknown people. And they may have work that is of higher caliber and more important than anything that you can get in the common marketplace. But then they die just like everyone else, and it's like they never existed. Example, Nima. Hopefully some people remember Nima. Incredible contributions to the magical community. No one talks about her anymore. That's tragic, right? So I, for whatever else you can say about me, I try in every way that I can to be loyal to the tradition because I am very aware that I am not special, that these ideas are inherited, that I am practicing things that were handed down to me that I'm now handing on to other people, and all I seek to be is another link in the chain. And frankly, a lot of these people I miss, whether I met them or not. It sucks when people die. It sucks when mentors and people older than you die, because then you miss them, and it's not just them, but it's a whole world has closed off that you can't get back into. So Vox, as opposed to when you get initiates high. Yes, definitely. All right, chapter 3, the deeper issues of occultism. What is occultism? This is a question we may very well ask if we intend to devote time and trouble to its pursuit. Are we to content ourselves with tales of haunted houses, accounts of telepathy among primitive peoples, and research into the esoteric literature of the past? These things certainly have their value. All available occult phenomena should be carefully investigated, not only for the sake of obtaining knowledge, but also for the sake of unmasking charlatans, and the results obtained by investigators in the past are of the greatest value for counter-checking the results we are obtaining at the present day. But is this enough? Is our attitude towards occult science to be the same as our attitude towards the classical languages, in which we admire the masterpieces of antiquity, but ourselves produce no living literature in the present? We know that the mysteries exercised a profound influence on the ancient civilizations, and that some of the noblest men of all races were inspired by them and regarded them with reverence and awe. Are the phenomena we call occult merely those of the seance room on a larger scale? Or, in addition to the little-known laws of nature whose operations we seek to penetrate, is there an energizing spiritual influence such as raised the consciousness of the initiates of old and gave them a deeper understanding of their gods? Let us consider the phenomena which may justly be described as occult or hidden in their working and nature. Ectoplasm, psychometry, clairvoyance in all its forms, telepathy, the various forms of divination, which are far from being altogether delusive, mystic experiences, conversion, trance and rapture, hypnotism, suggestion and autosuggestion, the survival of bodily death, and last but not least, certain forms of mental disease. All these things are hidden in their nature, not amenable to ordinary scientific methods of investigation with instruments of precision, and legitimately form the field of investigation into occult science. There is, however, another aspect to occult science, as well as its scientific side, and that is the realm of inner experience, which its practical application as an art opens up. The gateway into the unseen can be found by the practical application of its principles, and those who care to fulfill the conditions and take the risk may adventure therein. The powers that the ancient rituals invoked still remain, and are not very far to seek for those who combine knowledge, faith, and courage. If, however, we desire to essay this adventure, we should remember that the ancient rituals were used as part of a religious system, and that no initiate of the ancient mystery schools would ever have dreamed of experimenting with them to satisfy his curiosity or love of the marvelous. He approached them with reverence after strict discipline of character and severe tests of fitness. It was when the lofty ideals fell into abeyance that phallicism and black magic began. No comment. I think she may be talking about the OTO here, and I'll say no more. If we want to penetrate into the deeper issues of occultism, it is not enough that we should approach it out of intellectual curiosity. This will reveal us no more than its outer form. The occult path is not so much a subject of study as a way of life. Very true. Unless the element of devotion and sacrifice be present, the key will not turn in the lock that opens the door of the mysteries. That is objectively correct. 1000%. And I observe that not only in my own life, but in that of others. So I'm going to read that again. Unless the element of devotion and sacrifice be present, the key will not turn in the lock that opens the door of the mysteries. Unless we approach the sacred science as did the initiates of old. What the fuck is going on in the text? We got like ectoplasm bukkake going on in the text. No. Behave. Unless we approach the sacred science as did the initiates of old, we shall not find in it what they found. It is not enough that we work for its secrets as men work for the prizes of their profession. We must live for it as men live for a spiritual ideal. There is only one motive that will take us safely through the labyrinth of astral experience, the desire for light on the path of spiritual development that ends in divine union. This was the goal of the mysteries, in their noblest form, and it is only by seeking the same goal that we shall be able to enter into them in their higher aspect. Occult science is a very potent thing, and many people are protected in their researches therein by their own ineptitude. Yeah, also very true. Many people are protected in their researches therein by their own ineptitude. Did they succeed in some of the operations they undertake? Their natures, unpurified and undisciplined, would be shattered by the result. It is only because no power comes through that no disaster follows. If we desire safely to investigate the mysteries, we must first approach them under their nobler aspect as part of a system of spiritual regeneration, and only after we have submitted to their discipline and offered the dedication of the lower self to the purposes of the higher, and had that dedication accepted, can we safely study the magical aspects of occultism which usually attract the unenlightened. That's also objectively true. So when she starts talking, and I've written about this in the John Dee book at length, Hey, Frater RC, welcome back. Shout out Devotion and Sacrifice. Thank you for your worthless Canadian money. No, I jest. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Everyone is too kind. Let me read that again. If we desire safely to investigate the mysteries, we must first approach them under their nobler aspect as part of a system of spiritual regeneration, and only after we have submitted to their discipline and offered the dedication of the lower self to the purposes of the higher. This is what you get in Hindu statues with the big god standing over the corpse. That's the higher self and the lower self. And had that dedication accepted, can we safely study the magical aspects of occultism, which usually attract the unenlightened? So meaning tarot, astrology, even things like Goetia, stuff like this. These are the trash of the masses. They're meaningless. Like, it's just crap, right? Unless you put them in proper context where they came from. These are tools for initiates. If they're used by initiates, then they mean something. You know, if you take tarot and for example, if you take tarot and map it to the tree of life, now it's a guide to every form of consciousness available to humanity. But if you don't have that, then it's just fortune telling, right? Which is less than worthless, because it just confuses people. All right. Our intellectual questionings can only find their resolution in spiritual illumination. I will caveat, though. Jack Parsons pointed out at one point, it's like, yes, this is true, but if you're a master, you can do whatever the fuck you can tell fortunes for money, you can do whatever the fuck you want. I thought that was pretty funny. Our intellectual questionings can only find their resolution in spiritual illumination. Occult science, rightly understood, is the link between psychology and religion. That's very straightforward. Occult science, rightly understood, is the link between psychology and religion. It gives the means of a spiritual approach to science and a scientific approach to the spiritual life. The experiences to which it admits us, rightly understood, form a stairway from rational brain consciousness, dependent on the 5 physical senses, to the direct apprehensions of spiritual intuition. Occultism can never be an end in itself. Yeah, that's something that people miss quite a lot. Occultism can never be an end in itself. As I tell people, it's a tool. You need to use the tool to find your true self, to get forward in your life. Otherwise, you just get lost in the labyrinth of learning more and reading more books and armchair magic. Occultism can never be an end in itself. It does but open up a wider horizon that ever recedes as we approach it. We are still in the realms of appearance. Nevertheless, it can be an invaluable means to many ends. A knowledge of its philosophy can give a clue to the researches of the scientist, and balance to the ecstasies of the mystic. Absolutely true. It may very well be that in the possibilities of ritual magic, we shall find an invaluable therapeutic agent for use in certain forms of mental disease. Psychoanalysis has demonstrated that these have no psychological cause, but it can very seldom effect a cure. It is here that the occultist, with his knowledge of the hidden side of things, can teach the psychologist a very great deal. Absolutely true. Yeah, go back and look at my video, The Black Tide of Occultism, on this channel to see me in open conflict with psychotherapists. It is so wild reading this stuff as an older person, having been through it, as opposed to a young person being like, whoa, what's all this about? And getting completely... not being clear what she's talking about. Now every sentence rings true. It's pretty wild, but it wouldn't make any sense if you hadn't had the experience. And it's also wild how little has changed, because people are people. People are the exact same people now as they were when she was writing, right? And they had the same silly shit that they do. All right. Occultism is a sacred science and should be approached with reverence. Straight is the gate and narrow the way that leads to its holy places, and few there be that find it. The angel with the flaming sword still guards the gate of the mysteries, and it is not wise to expose our souls to that force until we have purified them and are sure that we can give the right password when it is demanded of us. There comes a time in the experience of every student of occult subjects, provided he is sufficiently interested in them, when the ideas that occupy his mind begin to affect him. and the unseen world of which he has read is slowly rising above the horizon of consciousness, and the subtle is becoming tangible. He will find himself in a veritable no man's land of the mind, and he must do one of two things, and do it quickly. He must either bolt back into his body like a rabbit down its hole, or he must press on and open up to the higher consciousness. But one thing he must not do, he must not linger in the land of phantasms that is the frontier between subconsciousness and superconsciousness, for that way lies madness. When he comes to the gate of the higher consciousness, however, he will be met by the angel of the threshold, who will ask him the age-old question that he must answer before he can pass on. And the answer to this question is not any shibboleth that admits to a secret society, but the very reasonable query to be addressed to the stranger who knocks at any door. What is it you want? Yeah, I ask people this like every day in classes. What is it you want? And the answer to that question, and most people can't answer that question, whether they're in the occult or otherwise. And the answer to that question will depend not on the knowledge, but on the character of the applicant. Character. If rightly answered, the way will be made plain for his advancement. Absolutely true. And if wrongly answered, he will be left to find his way back to the earth plane as best he may, and that is neither a very pleasant nor a very safe experience. All of this is objectively true as observed by my own experience within the occult. To study occultism is to connect oneself up, to study occultism is to connect oneself up with a great powerhouse in the unseen. There may be no tangible results because one nature is made of non-conducting material, or because doubt of the reality of the phenomena investigated prevents the terminals of the psychic contact from being pushed home in their sockets. Knowledge and force form the two arcs of the circuit, and when these are conjoined, the power flows through. A nature which contains no force can study the sacred science, and no results will be brought about. And a nature which has no knowledge will be unable to utilize its force. Yeah, absolutely. But where there is both knowledge and force, it is only a matter of time till some illuminative idea gives a sudden glimpse of the significance of the inner life which completes the contact. And that person, for good or evil, is in circuit with the unseen powerhouse. For occult science in itself is neither good nor evil save as it is used. And that is why it is so necessary to approach it with clean hands, a pure heart, and a disciplined and dedicated will. Occultism is not child's play. Absolutely not. And it is very far from being foolproof. I don't think that's even a Kabbalistic statement. I think it's just a straightforward statement. Although it could be a Kabbalistic pun. I don't think it is, though. Occultism is not child's play, and it is very far from being foolproof. For its pursuit, strength is required. For its pursuit, strength is required as well as purity. Yeah, the emphasis on purity of character completely lost since the Chaos Magic period. And this is one of the many reasons why they didn't get very far. But all who have touched its deeper issues unite in declaring that it is no will-o'-the-wisp, dancing over a bottomless bog, but a true path to the light, though narrow as a razor's edge. Yeah, every single comment, every single line in here is true. Yes, we're reading Sane Occultism by Dion Fortune. Let me take a 30-second, 60-second break, and I will be right back to answer questions. Yeah, Wingsbound hit the dab. That's exactly what I was trying to do. Sadly, all of the weed stores are now closed in Texas. I'm very upset about that. Let me just go take a couple hits at least. Hold on. All right, I've just been informed that I may be breaking community guidelines talking about substances, but it's all legal. It's legal in Texas. All right, smoke weed every day. Let's see. I'm gonna look for choice comments. Thank you again to all the super. We still got the super chat going. Where are we at? Oh man, the chat's like on fire tonight, which is wonderful. Of course, I can't read every comment. Yeah, Howard, big energy in chat tonight. Eyeball, my personal mentors were poets. That's pretty cool. Vox says, "Love you, man. Lots of respect for you out here." Thank you. I really appreciate that. You know, I've been on the internet for most of my life, and most of the comments I get are negative. Actually, that's not true. Most of the comments are positive. I just give more weight to the negative ones, and so I've had this like antagonistic relationship to most of the magical community for quite a while. So I really comments like that mean more than you think. I think to me they really do. I appreciate it. Corporeal Chaos Consulting, that's cool. Thank you, Mr. Padrake. When I found your books, you impressed me. I appreciate it. Thank you. Howard says, yes, guys, remember to mash that like button and subscribe. Oh God, we got stalkers. God damn it. Okay. Where were we? Oh, Sasur's work. Oh, interesting. We're talking about, please like and subscribe. Hit the notifications bell. Saussure, so we're talking about Saussure and Pierce, who were semioticians. Yeah, who are you're correct, Fraud RC. Saussure and Pierce, very important. And semiotics as a field in general, very fruitful for occultists to study. Highly recommend that. 131, Pan. Has anyone ever tried to physically harm you because they thought you were evil? No, but I'm always strapped. So, good luck. Howard says the occultists who did real work will always be remembered. Shout out to the good ones. I hope so. Wow, we have so many comments. We got the ectoplasm. Oh yeah, Foucault's Pendulum, great book. Umberto Eco, Foucault's Pendulum. Haven't heard about that one in a while. That's a great book though. He talks about semiotics and the occult quite a lot in that one. That's an excellent book, Foucault's Pendulum. Electromagnetic plasma is ghost juice. Yeah, good call. Good call on semiotics. Absolutely. Dirtworm says, forget the mysteries. Can anything get done without devotion and sacrifice? Yeah, nothing that's worth... nothing in life that is worth doing does not require sacrifice. That's just reality. So yeah, you're correct. It's not just magic. Comment on phallicism. All right. Okay. Probably riled too many people up with that ectoplasm comment. Gray, I'm guessing by XPs you mean experience. Where do you draw the line between experiences that would be conventionally considered subjective, but in occult circles would be considered objective, or shared experiences of a current or collective? Does it matter? Well, I would say that even in occult circles, if people are starting to think things are objectively real, they're slipping. And Crowley makes that very clear in the beginning of Liber O. Don't take it too seriously. Frauder RC says, annex the U.S., please. It would be hilarious, honestly. Canada disturbs. Is it like I just saw the other day that 1 in 20 deaths in Canada are now elective self-unaliving? Is that true? And then I heard about how they're doing it. It really disturbed me that they're basically drowning people on sedatives as a way of elective self-unaliving. This was deeply disturbing to me. And it's just, there's this cold, I feel that Canada is like unbelievably friendly on the surface, but it's just cold and brutal on the inside. Thank you, Lucas, for coming. Vox is getting too thelemic in the lower and higher submission and virtue are all sex drug terms before they are anything philosophical. We're maximum over thelema here. Thank you. Yes, I am a Yank. Logic wouldn't be around without humans, but it's helpful. Reminded if the quote, if God didn't exist, it would be necessary to invent him. Same with logic. Logic is cool. Yeah. Hecate. Direct apprehensions. Oh man. People are talking about the drow, the dark elves. Stay out of the stoop not, as the Golden Dawn said, stoop not down into that darkly splendid world. And they were talking about the Underdark of the Forgotten Realms. Wow, so many comments. So many comments. Yeah, it's actually kind of hard to follow the thread of the chat. Okay, let's see. Frauder RC says basically all my friends are dead from elective self-unaliving. Really? I hope you're exaggerating. Brutal is the right word. Meat grinder is the word we use in Van City. Yeah, I was thrown out of Vancouver by the Canadian government. I was thrown out of the country. They allow me back in, but they really harass me every time I try to go back. They'll take me into an isolated room and shake me down for hours every time I try to go back. So I don't really go back because I don't like going back, which I guess is the idea of that type of treatment. But yeah. Mortonland, I'll throw this in. You should really play Fear and Hunger. Is it on PS5 or PC? So I have Mac and PS5. So hopefully it's in there. Ryan, this isn't a recap of the Super Bowl. Damn, it really went astray. That's funny. Okay. All right, let's get back to reading. I do want to know about the Canada thing, though. Okay. Unless it's too upsetting to talk about, which would be understandable. All right, chapter 4, credulity in occult research. Credulity means naiveness, believing things you shouldn't. Jesse says, well, Crowley was a spy and you're his big fan. I wouldn't necessarily call myself a fan of Crowley, the person. I am a fan of his work. And he was a spy. He worked for MI6, but God knows what I get up to. Do I have experience with Tahuti Lodge? No. There are OTO people on the chat, though, maybe you could talk to. Okay. Occult science has two enemies to contend with. The skeptical materialist who denies everything, and the credulous occultaster who believes everything. That's really funny. This is so on point. Occult science has two enemies to contend with. The skeptical materialist who denies everything. Oh, you're going to tease me. We can talk about it when you come on my podcast. Well, I would love to come on your podcast, but really you're going to do me like that? Okay. Occult science has two enemies to contend with. The skeptical materialist who denies everything and the credulous occultaster who believes everything. Serious students need to find the middle way between these two extremes. They must, on the one hand, avoid credulity, and on the other, recognize that the nature of proof available concerning the inner planes differs from that available for natural science. Spiritualism, working up from the material plane through the denser strata of the unseen, has been able to make use of a technique which satisfies even the laboratory-trained orthodox scientist. But the occultist, working in less tangible spheres, cannot avail himself of instruments of precision and appears to have given up as hopeless any attempt at proof, satisfied if he attains to personal certainty. That is extremely funny comment, Frauder. I'm not going to read it on chat, but that's very funny. This is an unsatisfactory state of affairs and opens wide the door to charlatanism and delusion. And we need to be quite sure that it is inevitable before we acquiesce. It is my contention that we need not rest satisfied with so insecure a position, for there are ways of testing the findings of clairvoyant investigation that will enable us to assess their value without spoiling the experiment. There are many different kinds of occult experiments, and I do not here propose to consider all that ground which has been adequately explored by the workers in psychic research. Yeah, I don't know anything about psychic research either, but Mitch Horowitz does, so check out his stuff on it. Nor yet the poltergeist type of phenomena, wherein the evidence of non-psychic witnesses has to be investigated, for both these are amenable to the ordinary laws of proof, but rather to consider the type of psychic research by clairvoyant vision with which the work of Rudolf Steiner and Charles Ledbetter has made us familiar. It is very necessary that we should have some criterion for judging this type of work. Yeah, I believe Ledbetter was a pedophile. It later came out, if I'm thinking of the same one, the Theosophist. It is very necessary that we should have some criterion for judging this type of work, for hosts of psychics have sprung up who lay claim to psychic vision and declare that they see people's auras. Yeah, okay, yeah. I've literally worked at psychic companies. This is so on point. It is very necessary that we should have some criterion for judging this type of work, for hosts of psychics have sprung up who lay claim to psychic vision and declare that they can see people's auras, read their past incarnations, or can conduct investigations of the Akashic records and the astral plane and offer no proof beyond their word. Yeah. The more things change, the more they stay the same. There is, let us admit it, substantial evidence that all these things can be done, but there is not always substantial evidence that a particular psychic is doing them. But we need to remember that because we discount the findings of a particular psychic, we are not disproving psychism, nor are we even discrediting that psychic, for no one knows better the extreme delicacy of their gift and its liability to distortion than those who themselves have vision. Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that as well. Sometimes if people are actually psychic, usually the issue is not that they're bullshitting, because usually they're not. The issue is they don't know how to control it, and they're all over the place, and they have boundary issues with other people, and they take on other people's stuff, and often they have no idea what they're doing. And that can be very effectively structured by magical training, which psychics usually don't have. They have psychic, they may not even have psychic training. There is purely psychic training, but depends on how skilled they are. In dealing with occult experiments, we need to adopt two attitudes and to keep them distinct. At the time of the experiment, we must have absolute faith, and after the experiment is over, we must be impartially critical towards its results. Yeah, that's true. Faith is necessary at the time of the experiment because suspicion or skepticism gives unconscious suggestion to the medium or experimenter. Got another super $10. Thank you. Rediscovered you recently. Live streaming is too strong in the meta. So happy welcoming myself back to the Louvverse and welcoming you to my city. Well, thank you very much for the live chat. I very much appreciate it. You are all too kind. Thank you so much. Did we hit our goal? Looks like we hit our goal. So if anyone wants to suggest something to read, go ahead. Anyone who super chatted, if you want to suggest something. All right. Where were we? Yeah, faith is necessary at the time of the experiment because suspicion or skepticism gives unconscious suggestion to the medium or experimenter, and as those engaged in using the supernormal faculties are always in a very sensitive condition, a skeptical attitude on the part of an experimenter may effectually prevent the carrying out of an experiment by upsetting the psychic, making him lose his self-confidence and doubt himself, whereupon his faculties automatically close down. He fumbles tentatively on the borderland of his own subconscious mind and fails to pass out into the higher consciousness. Those who take part in any occult investigation should make up their minds to accept the theories on which it is based as working hypotheses, and to give themselves up wholeheartedly to the experiment while it is in progress. In this way, the group mind of the circle gives subconscious suggestion to the psychic and helps him to rise to a higher plane. Once he is safely established there, his confident and awakened consciousness tends to pull his circle up after him. They, too, become at least partially aware of the presence of the unseen, and their roused emotion and confidence lift their psychic up yet higher, and he becomes able to give them something worth having. None of the higher types of psychic faculty can be exercised unless the circle has also raised its consciousness as a plane. Yeah, these are, she's talking about dynamics that you basically have to have been in magical groups to understand. But again, Oh, they just rebanned Ye. Well, Ye should have taken his... Ye should stay on his meds. Because that I love Hitler... well, I probably can't even say Ye tweets on air. But, like, yeah, Kanye is ridiculous. Kanye is like a walking example of what happens when you let the ego run the show 100%. That's what you get, right? If your ego is utterly unchecked, that's what you get. And you don't want that. Whew. This attitude, however, should be reserved solely for the occasion of the experiment. As soon as it is completed, the experimenter should become a scientist again and examine his results in the cold light of science. His judicial attitude, however, should not be that of the English law, which has only two verdicts, guilty or not guilty, but rather of the Scottish law, which has a third possible verdict of not proven. That's interesting. I was not aware of that. And a very great deal of psychic matter should be referred to this latter class. Just keeping you on your toes. To await further evidence before it is accepted. At the same time, he ought not to allow himself to be discouraged by difficulty of proof, but bend his whole energies and ingenuity to devising fresh tests and experiments whereby his elusive subject matter may be nailed to the board of proof. He must remember, however, that there are in occultism two kinds of evidence and proof, which I will distinguish as objective proof and subjective proof. The laws of objective proof we know well enough. They concern the findings of the physical senses, counterchecked by logic and experiment. But we must not forget that there is also the evidence of things not seen, or subjective proof, which depends upon intuition. Now, intuition, like instinct, is a portmanteau word of many meanings, but the thing it represents is an actual thing, and in some degree or other, within the experience of most people. The Oxford Dictionary defines it as immediate apprehension by the mind without reasoning, immediate insight. And, so far as I know, orthodox psychology has not dealt with it otherwise than by trying to disprove its existence. But in this, as in a good many other points in which psychology has tried issue with popular belief, the latter has justified itself. And in our new knowledge of the nature of the subconscious mind, we find the clue to intuition. I propose to define intuition as subconscious mentation. Interesting. I propose to define intuition as subconscious mentation. I would update that by saying that she's using subconscious incorrectly, which is understandable for her time period. Well, actually, no, I'm sorry. She's using it correctly. No, it's not unconscious. She's using it correctly. I take that back. I propose to define intuition as subconscious mentation, wherein the logical processes are carried on below the threshold of consciousness and take cognizance of data which may never have been present to consciousness. In this form of thinking, it is only the finished process of which we become aware, the stages by which we arrive at it being hidden. Therefore, it is that intuition is referred to as being immediate and without reasoning. When, in addition to our knowledge of the nature of subconsciousness, we realize the existence of subtler senses than those five with which we are familiar, we must realize that the subconscious mind may have data to work upon of which the conscious mind knows nothing. So now this should be the unconscious instead of subconscious. And that its findings are not to be ignored. But on the other hand, remembering that the subconscious mind has also disassociated complexes, we realize that its findings are not to be accepted blindly. Let us therefore in occult research accept two kinds of data, the one derived from observation and the other from intuition. Let us admit that the latter, when properly counterchecked, can be just as reliable as the former, which, of course, also require counterchecking, as is admitted by all but the very naive. But do not let us make the mistake of confusing one kind of evidence with the other. It is a common thing in occult circles to hear people talk as if subjective evidence were entirely on a par with objective evidence, to make statements concerning Atlantis, or past incarnations, or the Masters, as if they were in possession of definite objective proof. And when the inquirer asks for evidence, the devotee gets angry, and his interlocutor disgusted. Yes, there are many unreleased podcasts like this, my podcast. I well remember that my entry into occult science was delayed for many years by this method of procedure. I had phenomena presented for my edification which would not stand up for 5 minutes under the most cursory investigation, and I, judging the bulk by the sample, condemned the whole system. I know now that I was dealing with subjective evidence, and that it is valid in its sphere, and can be proved by the appropriate methods. But when subjective evidence is submitted to the tests appropriate for objective evidence, as it always will be if offered as objective evidence, it promptly falls down, and the whole system and the person advocating it are discredited. Let us now consider further the nature of subjective evidence. It depends upon 3 types of perception. Intuition, as previously defined, of which the results, but not the process, are perceptible to consciousness. Conscious psychism, which I propose to define as perception by the subtler senses in full consciousness, not, at the present moment, going into the definition of the subdivisions into which it can be divided. And subconscious psychism, wherein the perceptions of the partially developed higher sense organs are too faint to touch consciousness, and therein become part of the data of intuition. The purely subjective data of intuition can be detected by means of psychoanalysis, and the vision of a seer can be subjected to the same process as a dream in the hands of a Freudian. That is to say, analysis by means of free association, with the technique of which the literature of psychotherapeutics is concerned, and which would be too lengthy to deal with here in detail. It must suffice to say that the subject is instructed to take each item of his dream or vision in turn, to dwell upon it, and to let his mind wander free from that starting point, while the psychoanalyst notes where it wanders. If the subject is honest in his endeavors, it will be found that the trains of free association, derived from the different dream symbols, are converging upon the same point, which is one of emotional importance to the subject, or else are coming to a dead stop at the same point, which shows that the object of emotion is dissociated. This process enables the dream symbols to be reduced to dream material, and throws an immense amount of light on the workings of the hidden side of the mind. In ordinary subjective dreams, the dream material is found to consist of repressed desires, memories of incidents occurring during the past day of which the emotion still reverberates, and impressions impinging on the 5 physical senses during sleep. There are, however, other types of dreams, which I will denominate as lucid dreams, and they are stimulated by impressions impinging on the subtler senses during sleep. The visions of the psychic are also due to the same mechanism operating with sufficient force to penetrate into waking consciousness. If such dreams and visions be submitted to psychoanalysis, it will be found that they usually contain a certain subconscious element in addition to their content derived from superconsciousness, and it is the task of the analyst to distinguish between the two. It will be found that these elements, which are derived from the subjective realm of the subconscious mind, will, when used as a starting point of a free association chain of ideas, lead thought straight back whence they issued, into the subconscious familiar to the Freudian analyst. But the elements that are derived from superconsciousness will, when subjected to the process of analysis by free association, lead thought also to the place whence they issued, in this case the superconsciousness, and will most effectually elucidate the meaning of the vision. They will also bring through into consciousness an immense mass of material which has previously been apprehended superconsciously, but has not succeeded in passing the gulf that separates the higher self from brain consciousness. We find that just as the dream symbolism could be reduced to dream material by this process of analysis by free association, so the vision symbolism can be reduced to vision material by the same means. But in the one case, the trail of free association leads into the subconscious, and in the other, into the superconsciousness. A further test, however, may appropriately be applied to the superconscious material thus rendered available. If words indicative of the principal symbols in the vision and ideas in the vision material be used in a word reaction test with a stopwatch, according to the method of Jung, and the reaction words submitted to a further analysis by free association, the resulting proof will not only be beyond cavil, but will open up still further the riches of the higher mind. So this is quite interesting because she was, I'm pretty sure writing contemporaneously with Jung, maybe slightly before, but I don't think so. I think they were writing about the same time. So you see Jung approaching occultism from psychology, while at the same time you see Dion Fortune approaching psychology from occultism. And I've never heard anyone make that link. But it's quite interesting to think about and look at them side by side. The use of the foregoing method will yield most interesting results. For although it will clearly demonstrate the subconscious element which is present in all psychism to a greater or lesser degree, it will also open up communications with the contents of superconsciousness and bring them through into brain consciousness. The use of free association for this purpose is a most important aspect of esoteric work, but its technique is too complicated to be discussed in detail in the present pages. A serious responsibility rests upon all who undertake the publication of the results obtained in occult experiments. They should make sure beyond all possibility of doubt that they have recorded and interpreted their visions correctly, both in concept and in detail, and should avoid in any way demanding of their readers a faith which renders ridiculous both those who ask and those who give, cough cough Muhammad, lest they bring into disrepute the sacred science which is for the healing of the nations. Yeah, totally on point comments. Totally on point. As true today as they were then. Okay, I'm going to probably do one more chapter, but let's check out the comments. Oh, boy. Yeah, Tahuti Lodge, I know people who were in it. I've never been, though. So I can neither vouch nor vouch it. Nor I can either... I don't say anything for or against the OTO, other than because I'm not in it. So I don't know the people that are in it now or what they're up to. So I can't say. I certainly think the system is quite beautiful. The Great Haster. Brad wants me to go on Frauder RC's podcast, all right? Robert Monroe, yeah, Howard's talking about Robert Monroe at the Monroe Institute. Very interesting writer on astral stuff. We're going to be... So Adept Initiative 2, which is upcoming and which is still open for application. Adept Initiative 2 is all about astral. So we're going to be talking about Monroe in there for sure. Vox says, would have loved to get a magical baby from Fortune and Crowley and give her an electric guitar and an army. That's hilarious. As far as I know, Dion Fortune was a lesbian, but was closeted. I may be pulling that out of my ass, but I get that vibe. Howard says, these are the occult merchants who sell you the visible, colorful world of magic. Yeah, the Pantheon Bar from the Holy Mountain. A great... Everyone should... I say this a lot. If you haven't seen the Holy Mountain... I know it's an obvious, it's like a too obvious recommendation, but nothing's too obvious. You should definitely watch that movie. It's excellent film. The Book of Eli is a great work. I haven't seen Book of Eli. That's interesting. Tahuti Lodge was my first Gnostic Mass. Highly recommended. Okay, yeah. Seeing the Gnostic Mass is a great idea. Just don't eat the cookie unless you know what's in it and you're fine with that. Boundaries, our friend. Yes. Don't mess with Texas. That's right. Yeah, so Ye was only back on Twitter for a day before getting banned. Well, not surprising. He was just straight up posting swastika t-shirts for sale and stuff. He's completely... That's what happens when you... Ye is what happens when your ego runs the show and nobody tells you no. Let's see... Interesting. Mr. Padrake 23 says, I learned the hard way that precognition makes one a dangerous fatalist, Howard. I'm interested for you to say more about that. That sounds like there's something worth pursuing there. Yeah, meander around Dion Fortune is such a good way of putting things into words, yeah. Oh no, people are talking about the red heifer. No, that's forbidden. That's forbid. Don't talk about the red heifer. Oh no, the prophecy of the red heifer. My God. Oh wow, Vox has Jason looking like Jodorowsky and Holy Mountain. Well, thank you. That's quite a compliment. I'll take it. Thank you very much. Let's see. Witch Talk could benefit from this book, yeah. Develop your organ, brah. The thelema's getting out of control in the comments here. I do have a video reacting to Witch Talk on here. Yeah, Freud. Hopefully everyone watched my Freud video. Okay, interesting. Let's see. Wait. People are talking about herbs. Let's say mugwort before bed for dream work. Vaporizing. That's interesting. I'm gonna try that too. I'm getting some good recommendations here. I used to smoke mugwort back in college. Actually, when I was oddly enough, I'm remembering now when I was reading The Mystical Kabbalah by Dion Fortune for the first time, I was smoking mugwort. So that's weird. But yeah, I should give that a shot too. Blue Lotus, yeah. So it doesn't help with sleep, but it helps you go lucid and have better recall. Well, that sounds quite helpful. I'm going to test that out before Adept 2. Chaos Moon says mugwort made me nauseous and a headache the next day. Yeah. Yeah, everything. Huh. Well, we're getting some gnome wisdom here. Mr. Padrake says, Vox, soak it in red wine. So mugwort, soak it in red wine for a month and drink a cupful? That's interesting. Jungian and Giga Chad versus Freudian Virgin. Yeah. That's really interesting. I'm going to have to take notes from the chat here. Jesse says, I manifested money once. It was this 4-year-long spell, very arcane, involved writing a lot of essays and solving math, building electronics and other lab work. That's funny. Howard, I wonder if you can probably astral project better on mugwort. That is also interesting. Well, this is a very productive chat. This is great. You guys are giving me some great stuff here. Blue Lotus, Kava. So that would be interesting to test too. We're going to get some off Amazon. So Howard says, yeah, fragrance and incense is also very important in magic because spirits are drawn to smell or live in perfume mediums. Yeah, so this is why so currently we're doing Adept Initiative 1, which is based around meditation primarily and self-analysis. And I tell people straight up, do not use incense. And Dion Fortune says that, I believe in Mystical Kabbalah or Psychic Self-Defense, that when you're just getting started out, no, you shouldn't use incense because the olfactory sense is the strongest association maker in the entire human consciousness, and it can just be overwhelming. The Pantheon Bar. Alex says, I just watched that the other night for the first time. Holy Mountain, I'm guessing. Very cool. Howard says, with the mountain climber, you can only climb horizontally. I love that part. Yeah, the Pantheon Bar. See, my deal is I told Alvin Chapman this. I went up the Holy Mountain. I passed the Pantheon Bar on the way up. Then I came down and just decided to set up shop in the Pantheon Bar to make a few bucks. That's a good way to get information out. Dylan says, don't eat the cookies, should be above the door of every lodge. Yeah, but then it would be giving it away, wouldn't it? Bledsoe Said So has interviews Monroe. Oh, that's interesting. Uncrowned Oak says there's a podcast interviewing family members of Robert Monroe. Did they speak well of it? Or were they saying it was bullshit? Jesse says, Ye reminds me of a meth addict. Yeah. Yeah, Howard, the guy talking about the cross being a mushroom. Yeah, very similar to certain occult authors. I'm going to name my YouTube channel Red Heifer. Let's see. Ryan has a tea company that has mugwort. Well, shit. Put a link in. Damiana tea. Yeah, Damiana is interesting too. I tried that in college. Hops, by the way, are very interesting on their own, not in beer, but just you can boil hops and they make that suds that beer has, and that helps sleep. I learned about a lot of this from Frater UD's Secrets of Western Sex Magic book. He talks about this stuff in there. Frater UD, the pen name of Ralph Tegtmeyer, a German magician, who very hilariously so for those who don't know, Ralph Tegtmeyer is probably the most prolific occult writer in Germany. He's written dozens and dozens of books, almost none of which have been translated into English other than a few. He was involved in the IoT and all that back in the day. But his pen name in Germany is Frater VD. So his first book published here was Secrets that you can imagine, Secrets of Western Sex Magic by Frater VD. So that's why they changed his name to Frater UD. Galantamine, yes. Galantamine is an excellent but very potent supplement for lucid dreaming, which requires proper, fairly precise proper use. But yeah, galantamine is for real. Mimosa hostilis bark plus rue with, well, that's just ayahuasca, right? Base ego and nitrous addiction, bad combo, yeah. Oh, very strong DMT extract. Yeah, I mean, it's basically MacGyver ayahuasca. Locke says, I love how there's legit pharmacological knowledge along with a esoteric knowledge and hanging out exactly as it should be. Yeah, yeah. This is what in occult. This is what occult groups are like. Basically, this type of thing. Blue Lotus, mugwort. Yeah, mugwort is not code. My mouse keeps slipping around the chat. Smell of Nok Champa, yeah. Mugwort tea is very heady. What do you mean by that? People love Nok Champa. You damn hippies in this chat. Got a bunch of hippies in here. This is turning into a hippie herb free for all. Mr. Padrake says, Renato, I'd gone on a gin Damiana bender, wound up on the beach outside of Santa Cruz. No idea how I got there. That's really funny. Yeah. By the way, I went to UC Santa Cruz, so it's like I was in Santa Cruz when I was doing all these things. So I know the feeling. Santa Cruz is a strange place. Interesting. So people, Chaos Moon is talking about Nog Champa triggering the smell, triggering an altered state. Vox says the OG way is to burn the cookie with the magic stuff and then use the ash on the dough for the rest of the cookies. You're not supposed to have live fluids in there. Yeah. So if they're doing it correct, it should be ashed. So that's probably fine. Oh no, people still do it wrong. Okay, you're going to have to name names here. So are you saying active OTO lodges don't ash the ingredient X, shall we say, before they do the cookies? Because if that's true, I'm never going back. You can also bring your own cookies, so you can do that. Tried Fortune's recipe for her Fire of Azrael incense. Good stuff. I've never heard of that. What is that? Box says you burn it over and over and over again in a calcination process, making a powder or projection, and then that's what's used on the cakes. Cool. Yeah, mugwort and blue lotus are legal. Lucid dreaming on CBD oil that I applied onto the tongue. CBD, I like CBD, but I feel like I have really high tolerance. I didn't always, but I have really high tolerance. But even when I didn't, CBD, I didn't really feel it do anything. I mean, I felt relaxed, but it wasn't very noticeable. I like it, but it's I feel like for how expensive it is, it's not very strong. You saw shadow people on CBD? How much did you take? Okay, incense is in the Sea Priestess. I have that, so I will have to check that out. Talking about shadow people. What the hell? Unreleased podcast. There's not really a whole lot to talk about there. People are talking about Googling. So yeah, I got my galantamine off Amazon, but this is like 15 years ago, so I don't know what the quality is like. So Ryan, are you talking about Damiana? Wait, what was the heady stuff? I already forgot. Oh, mugwort tea. So mugwort tea smacks like a strong indica. Well, that sounds quite lovely. Actually, because indica is my jam for sleeping, with a semi-psychological effect, non-hallucinogenic, but tastes like farts. How many farts have you tasted? Interesting. You get them straight from the source. That's definitely interesting though. That's pretty encouraging if it's like a strong indica. I assume you can just you can probably make it really as strong as you want, right? Shadow beings. Okay. Most CBD is a scam. So hard to find the good stuff. Yeah, I've had strong stuff, but it's also kind of like now that THCA is legal, the question is also, at what point once both CBD and THCA is legal, is there still benefit in isolating out CBD just for the average person? That's an open question. Alex says, this is true. I feel like weed is a huge blocker between me and lucid dreaming. So yes, it's well known that marijuana will block dream recall. It may block dreaming altogether. So it's a trade-off. So that's just definitely true. It is what it is. So Vox says that's exactly what I'm saying, Jason. They don't, not all of them, but some lodges do. Very bad. Bad form. That is overriding consent frameworks, and that will come back to bite people. Ryan says, I always try and push CBD and everyone says the same thing. I don't feel it. Personally, I think it's life-changing. So I've done a lot of it. I like it. I'm not saying it doesn't do anything. I'm just saying that for how expensive it is, I don't know. I'm just complaining about how expensive it is. CBD soda, yeah. San Pedro tea is nice when it's strong. Someone I met has done so many drugs in their life that CBD just doesn't feel like very strong. Equivalent of Howard says I took the equivalent of 80 drops or something. Yeah, you can get really high concentrated extract too. I've definitely done it to the point where when I had really high concentrate, it caused an uncomfortable life review, which is good. Similar to how strong marijuana does. So there's that. Jonathan, thank you for the super chat. Were you ever into listening to Coast AM Art Bell? Well, I've been on Coast to Coast several times, but with George Nuri. Great people. Really, shout out to Coast. Love them. Definitely listen to the Art Bell version back in the day. Yeah, that was great times. Yes. So Andrew says, I came from Magic and you're talking about pot. Well, guess you're on the wrong YouTube channel then. CBD is not psychoactive. So yes, Chaos Moon says CBD is effective in helping children with epilepsy reduce or eliminate the numbers of their seizures. Yeah. Charlotte's Web was the company that pioneered that. I remember reading about that in the newspaper. That is just phenomenal. Right? I think it helps with a whole lot of other stuff too. I'm not knocking it at all. I just wish it was stronger. That's it. All right. Wow, Alex was raised on George Nuri. Are you like 12? That just makes me feel old. All right. Okay, cool. So let's get back on track. Chapter 5. But thank you for all the recommendations. These are all great. Oh, Vox says, I remember reading that yogis don't dream. That's interesting. So Paramahansa Yogananda suggested that, yeah, if you should just be in deep sleep. That dreams are a disruption of the deep sleep state. That's quite interesting. It's definitely an interesting angle, and that will make me feel better, I suppose. Okay. Mr. Padrake 23 says, if pot was not meant to be magical, then why did Crowley list it in 777? Alex, finna be 30, bro. Okay. We're all old. You're still very young. Liber 420 wasn't, well, there is no Liber 420. Somebody, I'm sure, made that. But if you haven't read it, I highly, and we're going to be talking about this, and actually, oddly enough, we're going to talk about this. This just stuff is at the top of my mind because I'm prepping the course. The essay, The Herb Dangerous in the Equinox, that is by the pen name Oliver Haddo, which is just Crowley. So Crowley wrote the serialized essay, The Herb Dangerous, which is about the effects on consciousness of cannabis indica. And specifically him relating it to the Buddhist trances, the jhanas. Unbelievably valuable essay. Unbelievably valuable. So Crowley very clearly, the drugs that Crowley had access to outside of heroin and cocaine, which he did not use for, probably not at first at least, for psychoactive reasons, but they were prescribed for him as for asthma. But the psychoactive drugs he had access to were cannabis indica, peyote, so anhelonium Louv or whatever that's called, and ether, which is very hard to get these days, and that's probably good. So he was working with what he had. All right. Chapter 5, Meditation and Psychism. By the way, drugs are not necessary for magic, in case anyone gets that idea. It's just magic people tend to talk about this kind of thing. Many people think that it is impossible to conduct any research into the unseen unless definite clairvoyant powers have been... Oh, also, every drug we've mentioned on this cast is legal. We're talking about legal herbs and substances, okay? Excuse me. Many people think that it is impossible to conduct any research into the unseen unless definite clairvoyant powers have been developed. This, however, is not the case. After we have reached a certain stage of training, we can penetrate far into the unseen by means of meditation. Absolutely true. Occult meditation is a combination of the two methods of free association and directed reverie. It begins with free association, starting with an idea which is known to have been derived from the inner planes by the operation of the higher consciousness. That is why such books as The Voice of the Silence are so valuable for meditation. So Voice of the Silence was a book by Blavatsky that I believe is reprinted in Secret Doctrine that is the pinnacle of her work. And everyone should read that. Crowley wrote a commentary on it in The Equinox, where he looked at it from the perspective of a master of a temple and of higher Buddhist trance states. That's a must, Voice of the Silence. And passes over, or should pass over, into directed reverie. The secret of success lies in keeping the mind steadily on its plane and subject, but leaving it free within the limits of that subject, an operation which requires considerable experience and skill. Interesting. So she's talking about Western occult meditation, which is much closer to, what do they call that in Christianity? Christian meditation, contemplation. So it's better to call it contemplation, to not get it confused with Eastern meditation, which is largely about thought stopping or constraining. There's so many different types, so that's a generalization. John Michael Greer posted recently on Twitter something really interesting, where he said that he thinks that one of the reasons why people are a little bit too credulous in the occult is there's too much Eastern meditation practice, which is based on overcoming the rational mind. Whereas Western meditation works with the rational mind. I suppose another example of Western meditation or mentation would be, for instance, the Socratic method, right? So interesting stuff. I thought that was a great tweet. He's great. This method has yielded us an enormous amount of our occult knowledge, for by its use, not only the experiences, but also the teachings received on the inner planes are brought through into brain consciousness. But like all other research, it requires counter-checking, and much confusion and discredit have resulted from the failure to observe this very necessary precaution. The findings of meditation must perforce remain nothing but speculations until they have been counter-checked and proved. And what we need in occult science is a method of proof which shall test the results without spoiling the experiment. The psychoanalytical tests cannot satisfactorily be applied to the results of meditation because these are admittedly the fruits of the subconscious mind, although the occultist takes a much broader view of the subconscious mind than the psychologist does. The analysis of meditation simply reveals that the conscious mind is obtaining access to the subconscious and availing itself of the hoarded material of the hidden self. This, of course, neither proves nor disproves the value and accuracy of the results. If the subconsciousness contains the truth, the findings of the meditation will be true, and it in no way reduces the value of subliminal material to prove that it has been stored in the subconscious memory, for it may very well have got into that memory as the result of a true psychic vision, which has not been brought through to consciousness. In dealing with the fruits of meditation or reverie, we need to check the facts, not the origin of them, for the value of the teaching thus obtained does not depend upon its source, but on its intrinsic nature. We need to escape from the dominion of authority if we are to do any serious work in occult research. The value of a message from the inner planes or inner self does not depend on the name claimed by the communicating entity, but on the nature of its message. The spirit of Victor Hugo has had some ghastly doggerel fathered upon it, and many another great intellect has discoursed in vapid platitudes when recalled from the unseen. Yeah, funnily, they never seem to have their same writing genius. Because a spirit calls itself Victor Hugo does not mean that it is Victor Hugo, and even if it were, what is the use of listening to it if it talks nonsense? And if out of our own subconscious mind we can elaborate material that is of value, shall we have the spiritual snobbishness to scorn it because of its homely origin? The subconscious mind is infinitely richer than the conscious mind. So here, this should be unconscious, because subconscious is the level, the strata just below conscious awareness, whereas the unconscious is the unconscious that is accessed through meditation and dreams and is generally not available. That's what Freud was talking about and what Jung was talking about. The subconscious mind, unconscious, is infinitely richer than the conscious mind, containing as it does everything we have ever forgotten, everything which has ever impinged on a sense organ, whether consciousness has noticed it or not, and also, according to occult science, the experiences of the astral body during sleep and the memories of past incarnations. It is therefore clear that if we gain access to our subconscious mind, we have obtained possession of a rich storehouse of memory. But, as by definition the subconscious mind is below the level of consciousness, it follows that consciousness cannot penetrate to the level of subconsciousness, but must find some device to induce the subconscious content to become conscious. Absolutely true. By the way, Freud at one point says straight up, the goal of psychoanalysis is to make the contents of the unconscious conscious. To make the contents of the unconscious conscious, which is absolutely what all this stuff does as well. Freud, by the way, very interested in Kabbalah as a younger person. Not as a practitioner, but he came from a Jewish family and was interested in Kabbalah as a psychological metaphor. He just didn't put it directly into his work. So just to recap, but as by definition the subconscious mind is below the level of consciousness, it follows that consciousness cannot penetrate to the level of subconsciousness, but must find some device to induce the subconscious content to become conscious. This is achieved by means of the directed reverie of occult meditation. It is this brooding of meditation which causes the development of much occult knowledge, and which might more truly be called the hall of learning than the astral temple of the imagination, which usually goes by that name. It is much more likely that the occult doctrines have been elaborated by these natural means than by anything spectacular in the way of manus and messiahs, or manus and messiahs, materializing on the physical plane. That which is spiritual works upon the plane of spirit, and has to be brought through to the mental plane by mental means, and to the physical plane by physical means, each plane being governed by its own laws. There are, it is true, souls among us of more than human stature, but the difference is in degree of development, not in kind. The difference is in degree of development, not in kind. That should be encouraging. We are all potential adepts. Some are adepts in the making, and just a few are adepts in actuality. Nature does not leap gaps. Yes. I do not mean by these words to discredit the idea of great teachers in the past, nor the possibility of great teachers in the present or the future, but I do most earnestly desire to discredit the idea of miracle and substitute that of law, natural and knowable, and of a place with that which is known and proven of man in the universe. So this is a classic Hermetic statement. This is a classic Hermetic statement, where to reject the idea of miracle, but to put it to see the supernatural as cotangent with the natural world, right? As a natural phenomenon that we simply do not understand yet. This is a classic Hermetic viewpoint that is not in contradiction with science at all. Let us then, if we desire to be true students of occult science, attach less weight to our visions and more to our meditations. Couldn't agree with that more. Couldn't agree with that more. Let us then, if we desire to be true students of occult science, attach less weight to our visions and more to our meditations until we come to the point when the consciousness which opens momentarily in vision has become part of our normal equipment, and we are so used to it as to be able to assess its value and use it at will. But, on the other hand, let us never forget that there is no such thing as revelation to brain consciousness. The revelation is always to the higher self, and has then to be translated through into brain consciousness. In that translation, discrepancies may occur. And therefore, all revelation and inspiration, even the clearest, requires counterchecking. Fortune, in a lot of ways, is an interpreter of Crowley. Most of what she wrote, well, first of all, they both came out of the Golden Dawn tradition, so they're elucidating Golden Dawn concepts for a popular audience. So they're both, in a way, interpreters of the Golden Dawn, so Mathers, right? But you can see here where she's expanding things that he may have said in one line in the same way her student Gareth Knight expanded things she said to much more, too much in some cases. But reading Fortune and Crowley side by side is invaluable, because you get not just what Crowley was saying, but then you get a contemporary from the same initiatory school who's interpreting and essentially giving a stereo effect, and that's very, very, very useful. Our problem, and also Fortune in many ways counterbalances Crowley's Horusness, his force and fire. Fortune was a humanizing and calming influence, I think, on the current, and should absolutely be studied. Our problem then is to devise a scheme of counterchecking that shall effectually test the truth of the fruits of meditation or inspiration while leaving room for new discoveries of occult science. Do not let us accept the limiting position that the occult teachings have once and for all been delivered to man, for surely as evolution advances, there must come a time when brain consciousness is able to receive more than heretofore, and so will be given more. The Book of the Law, for instance. But let us also, that was my comment, but let us also remember that what it receives will be but an extension of that which it has already received, yes, and will most assuredly fit in with it and not contradict it, yes. Neither, if the experience of the immemorial past is any guide, will there be any new factors or sudden departures introduced. Other way of saying the Tao is the Tao is the Tao. It must be expressed, the wheel must be turned and expressed with every generation, and when it is re-expressed for a new generation, it is updated to their language and level of technology and development, but the Tao is the Tao is the Tao. Nature is never arbitrary, whether on the visible or invisible planes. As above, so below has ever been the maxim of the occultist, and is a clue which will take us safely through the labyrinth, and to it we must cling. Again, applying the maxim, as above, so below, we shall find that a thing which is true on any plane of the cosmos is true through the whole of its system of correspondences. For instance, the same laws that apply to the solar system also apply to the atom. If, then, we are testing any item of clairvoyant research, let us apply its findings to the solar system and the human system. And if we find that it is true of both of these, then we may reasonably conclude that it is true concerning the thing to which it claims to apply. That is also true. Take, for example, the researchers of the late... Oh boy, here we go. Let's see what she says about this. Here we go. Take, for example, the researches of the late Dr. Steiner regarding Atlantis and Lemuria. Modern exploration and deep-sea soundings confirm the existence of a lost continent, and the new psychology shows in its descriptions of the levels of the mind states of consciousness which exactly correspond with the states of intellectual development which Dr. Steiner assigns to the different root races, thus confirming his statements just as embryology confirms the theory of evolution, by showing in the individual... By the way, because this was brought up before, Blavatsky, when she was talking about root races, was not talking about race in the way that is currently understood. In Blavatsky's way of thinking, the world has been created and destroyed many times over. Civilization has arisen and then been destroyed by its own Faustian ambition at least 5 times. And each time humanity regenerates, it regenerates as a new root race, which means the whole of humanity, but with different psychic faculties or customizations each time. So just to clear that up. She's not talking about differences of intelligence between races as we currently understand that term. She's talking about epochs of humanity. thus confirming his statements, just as embryology confirms the theory of evolution by showing in the individual the stages of development by which the species is believed to have evolved. We may therefore feel ourselves upon reasonably safe ground in accepting Dr. Steiner's account of the root races. Yeah, Fortune does go a little bit too theosophical sometimes. And when, in addition to this geographical and psychological confirmation, we also find a substantially similar doctrine set forth by Madame Blavatsky as derived from the ancient wisdom of the East, for which derivation she gives chapter and verse from the sacred books, we feel that we have the double confirmation of an ancient esoteric system and modern research, and we may therefore accept the doctrine of the root races as a fact established according to the laws of evidence, with which we have to be content in dealing with the subjective planes. Some of the occult theories that are being advanced nowadays, however, cannot be so tested. They have no correspondence with any occult system. They fit in nowhere among proven truths. Examples? A 12-strand DNA activation? Do people still talk about that? You know, all the quantum woo, all of that. Some of their supporters claim that their uniqueness proves the wonderful psychic powers of their promulgators, but the experienced occultist replies that it is their uniqueness which is their undoing, for it proves them to be no part of the cosmic scheme, which ever moves in cycles. This is another statement that I would have rejected as a young man, but now I just see as objectively true. That which has been comes round again on a higher arc, and nothing opens up in evolution whose germs are not implicit in involution. It is high time that we should turn round and ask for the evidence in support of the statements that are made in the name of the unseen, and let us dare, in the sacred cause of truth, to say not proven, when that evidence is not forthcoming. There is no religion higher than the truth, not even personal loyalty to a beloved leader. That is absolutely true. And that's theosophical statement, there's no religion higher than truth. Damn right. Well worth getting tattooed on your forehead. Not literally. We must recognize, however, that in occultism, a kind of evidence has to be admitted which would not be admitted in orthodox science, which is one of the causes of the latter's sterility when it applies itself to the study of life and mind. Subjective as well as objective evidence has to be accepted, because so much of the work of occultism lies in the subjective sphere, that is to say, in the realm of inner experience. A man may say, for instance, that he has had a certain inner experience, and as that experience is peculiar to him alone, no independent witness can be adduced in support of his statements. His word is the only evidence, and therefore we are told that we ought either to accept or reject his word. The world of orthodox science says, reject the unverifiable statement, the unrepeatable experiment. The world of occult science is very apt to say, accept the statement without trying to verify it, for it is on such statements that our structure of thought is built, and if you throw down one, the whole edifice of our faith will collapse. What answer can we make to this? Is there no via media? I suggest that we have two quite definite and quite independent criteria of criticism. Firstly, in the ancient occult systems that are guarded by the schools of initiation, and secondly, in psychology, not, of course, in psychology as popularly understood, but in the deeper application of it, which is being developed along esoteric lines. The ancient occult systems always have a pantheon of gods and goddesses who are all definitely related to each other as parents and offspring, brothers and sisters. There they are in great ramifying families, and wonderful stories are told of their adventures, stories wild as the fairy tales that delighted our youth. And after we have listened to all these fantastic and sometimes obscene absurdities, we are told, as above so below, and find that if we follow out the symbolism, we have an Ariadne thread which will take us through the labyrinth, not only of the universe, but also of our own natures. We shall find, moreover, that these different ancient pantheons have a strong resemblance to each other, and likewise that the cosmologies to be adduced from them are practically identical. So, Liber 777. And we may fairly reckon that in those things wherein they confirm each other all the world over, they are substantially correct. So, this was how initiates at the time thought. Yes and no, but generally yes. Against these ancient definite schemes of things, let us measure the findings of our modern psychics, and if we find that they fit in and are confirmed, then we may reasonably believe that we have received a genuine contribution to our occult knowledge. But if violence has to be done to the ancient systems, if they have to be pulled and pushed to make them fit, we would do well to look for the discrepancies in the findings of the modern psychic, rather than in the immemorial faith of the ancients. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, this is traditionalism in a nutshell. By these tests, can we countercheck all contributions to esoteric cosmology? They must fit in with the ancient systems and modern demonstrable science. But, on the other hand, we must not demand of psychism proofs which by its very nature it is unable to give. We must bear in mind the fact which modern thought tends to forget, that there are two kinds of logic, deductive as well as inductive. Modern inductive science is a reaction from the deductive methods of the ancients, but the inductive method is not possible in any department of knowledge until we have a mass of particulars from which to build up a general concept. When we are dealing with matters already known in their broad outlines, we can, without unnecessary delay in starting, accumulate a mass of observations and set to work with the inductive method. But when we are dealing with the totally unknown, as we often are in occult research, the deductive method is the only one we can use at the start, for we have no means of knowing whither to direct our observations nor what facts are relevant. Occult science makes great use of intuition and deduction, but having built up a system of concepts by such means, these concepts, if valid, should be capable of confirmation by the use of the experimental, inductive method of orthodox science. Our previous intuitive, deductive researches serve to indicate to us the direction in which to look for our data, and the line along which our researches are likely to proceed. But while such indications are invaluable and save an immense amount of time, we should not be content with purely subjective, intuitional methods, but follow up our psychic researches with experimental confirmation, and not reckon any psychic vision or teaching as proven until this has been done. Faith and authority have no more part in occult science than they have in natural science. Those teachings of occult science which are not capable of immediate proof should be classed as hypotheses, and the cella means a student, so guru cella, and the cella should no more be asked to give blind belief than the student of chemistry. It is quite true that the higher branches of both sciences are only accessible to those who have fitted themselves by training for their comprehension, but from the very start, modern chemistry training combines theory with practice, and so it should be with occultism. Does this mean, however, that occultism itself is a delusion? I think we have ample evidence that this is not the case. Out of the flood of credulity and wasted effort, there stand up certain mountain peaks. There is more in heaven and earth that is dreamed of in the orthodox philosophies, and it is this that occultism takes for its field, and the fact that its most ancient teachings have received confirmation from modern scientific research shows that its work has not been wholly fruitless. When, however, I listen to the talk of some of those who are interested in occultism, I feel as if I had returned to the Dark Ages. Yeah, so much of it is sheer credulity and superstition, absolutely. TikTok. Such romantic previous incarnations, such wonderful auras, such authoritative teachings received from the masters, everything accepted without any counter-checking or attempt at verification. Now, I do not dispute that such things are possible. In fact, I may say that from my own personal experience, I am satisfied that there is adequate evidence in support of all these things, and can and do accept them as part of my personal faith, but I cannot help saying that a great many of the anecdotes that I have heard recounted impress me as very far-fetched. In the old days, it was the custom to deny anything that was not as tangible as the dome of St. Paul's. Nowadays, that's St. Paul's Cathedral in London, in the center of London, beautiful church. Nowadays, built on a temple of Diana that was there, built by the Romans prior to the church. Nowadays, it seems to be the fashion to, similarly to the churches throughout Europe and, throughout the world, it's like you'll have like a mosque that was built on a church that was built on a pagan site. Interesting. Nowadays, it seems to be the fashion to accept anything that is mysterious. Yeah. People quote the statement of a psychic about their past incarnations or the state of their auras as proof positive. If it were not that there is so strong a feeling in occult circles for humanitarianism, I have no doubt that we should find people scrabbling in the interiors of cocks in search of omens. That's roosters. There are statements current in occult circles concerning mysterious occult colleges and their marvelous museums and libraries, and the masters and their mundane habitations, which in their widespread acceptance and lack of tangible evidence bear a strong family likeness to the rumors concerning the passage of the Russian troops through England, which were current during the early days of the war. Everybody had heard them, and nearly everybody believed them, for to do otherwise was to be accused of pro-Germanism. And although they no doubt this is what people are like now too. I said this in one of the earlier videos, they have a talismanic approach to ideas, where if you bring up an idea that somebody associates with a group they don't like, they will dismiss you completely, rather than looking at the idea. It's very lazy. And although they no doubt served some useful purpose in keeping up our hearts during the dark days of the retreat, it is a curious chapter in crowd psychology that the man who preferred to base his patriotism on fact rather than fancy should have met with persecution and have been dubbed an enemy. A nervous crowd is a dangerous thing, and it is a bold man who will lay sacrilegious hands on the popular idols which quiet its fears. This was just written for me specifically. Oh. A nervous crowd on YouTube and Twitter is a dangerous thing, and it is a bold man who will lay sacrilegious hands on the popular idols which quiet its fears. So, for those who are following me, Sundays we're doing Sunday services where we're doing constructive reading. During the week, I do Jason Lives a Gory Hour, where we do destructive reading, and I attack sacred idols and show the truth about some things that people just accept as received truth. For instance, the video on Freud, the video on Reich, which really upset people, and I'm going to do another one, and so forth. But it will not be until we break free from authority in occultism, whether that authority be claimed for the seen or the unseen, that we shall do any more serious work in this department of thought than the schoolmen of the Dark Ages did in natural science. Right on. And people have made no more progress on this than her day. In many ways, they've backslid. There are very few intellects, even of Dion Fortune's caliber, writing now. The need of certainty is very strong in human nature. It is only a highly I'm not saying they're not there. But they're hard to find. It is only the need of certainty is very strong in human nature. It is only a highly trained mind that is able to suspend judgment on insufficient evidence. But it is better to endure the torture of uncertainty than to believe a lie. Yeah, it is better to endure the torture of uncertainty than to believe a lie. And I am convinced that if popular occultism would be content to do as a great industrial undertaking has recently done, cut its capital in half, she might be talking about, is she talking about the Standard Oil breakup? She might be. Or Ma Bell, Pac Bell. I'm convinced that if popular occultism would be content to do as a great industrial undertaking has recently done, cut its capital in half, it would find it was able to pay dividends on the remainder and become once more a solvent concern. Great is truth, and shall prevail, and no one who is sincere need fear her. Woo. All right, let's check out comments. How's everyone doing? It's 10:56 right here. Happy 30th, close to be 30th birthday, Alex. Has anyone vaped valerian for their dream yoga? Also an interesting idea. No. Oblivion is my favorite part of sleep. Yeah. Oh my, so many comments here. You guys are going wild. It's like a mosh pit in here. Jesse says, I feel like dreaming is maybe half to a quarter of the joy in life. I couldn't go without it. Yeah. Well, deep sleep's pretty good too, but yeah. What about fat dabs? Indeed. Howard says Crowley probably had tons of ether, bro. He did. Ether is awful. I've never done it. I've never met anyone who's done it because it's such a controlled substance that only, I think, industrial chemists have access to it at this point. But Crowley and the early Thelemites did a lot of it. Also, the Thelemites in the 60s did a lot of it. And it seems to have really eroded them. Dirtworm 777, well, the tables of 777. John says, if all the karma's burnt, what does the subconscious have to tell you when you dream? Well, that's an interesting theoretical way to look at it from a yogic perspective. 93 kilos of ether, yeah. Ryan says they'd be giving out ketamine nasal sprays. Who is? Who's giving away ketamine nasal? What? The old Hunter Thompson combo. Frauder says, my buddy Chris Bennett wrote Liber 420. It has 777 pages. Great book. He wrote a few massive tomes on cannabis and soma. Put a link in the chat. I'd love to see that. Wingsbound says, singing praise and worship feels like a drug, at least for me. Always found that interesting. Yeah. As occultists, we're interested in all routes to altered states of consciousness, and church service is definitely one of them. Religious ceremony is absolutely a route to alter consciousness. People are talking about precog. Vox says there's an old text that says, of all the ingredients of the mystery, the song is the principal active ingredient. Yeah. Ryan's talking about, yeah, frankincense and myrrh are mildly hallucinogenic. Yeah, the church knows that. Yeah, they absolutely are. They're in my opinion, frankincense and myrrh are they're the top of incense, right? The strongest word. Frauder says the Greek word Christians use for contemplation is theoria. Interesting. Wing says we get our cities without asking for them directly. Yes. Remember, they're not the point. But yeah. Same mistake people make with absinthe. Vox says you don't check your work while you're working. Everyone from fight sports knows this. If you look at the bag where you hit it, your form will be wrong. Chin tucked. Yeah. Mr. Padrake says Ryan, the big three were frankincense, myrrh, and balsam, which incidentally in early Hebrew often was also written as gold, and some biblical scholars believe it wasn't actual gold. That's interesting. Gnosis Magazine. That's taking me back. Jay Kinney. The imaginary universe emanates, bruh. Miracles are of nature. Let's see. Frauder says Freud hated woo-woo and is angry at Jung for... Freud hated woo-woo and was angry at Jung for entertaining it even when they beheld phenomenon together. The guy from Blonde... So yeah, Gary Lockman is a great source. Primarily, Freud was just concerned with psychoanalysis being accepted by the mainstream, which is the primary reason he wanted the occult left out of it. I believe this is actually, there's a great movie, David Cronenberg movie called A Dangerous Method, where they talk about it. It's about Freud and Jung, where they talk about that. World History live stream or video collab with Mitch Horowitz, please. Sure. What is a world history live stream? You want me to tell you the entirety of world history in a live stream? I can't read everything. I apologize. There's so many comments, but I'm glad everyone's whiling. Hits blunt, yeah. Land of Mu? Oh, we're talking about Lemuria. The lemurs. Yeah, Nick Land was obsessed with is obsessed with lemurs also. Really odd. Vox says the town may change location, but the well does not move. About the Tao, yeah. We're talking about yugas and root races. Alex says, don't the Goetia have a history like that too? Destroyed failed worlds? In some of them, yeah. Frauder says, I love Steiner. I think he had some crazy ideas, but boy, did he prophesy autism accurately, read telepathy tapes. Really? The telepathy tapes keeps getting recommended to me. That's interesting. Well, you know, Waldorf's, if you want to take Steiner, by their work, you shall know them. Waldorf schools, biodynamic farming, pretty good. That's some good stuff. So maybe I'm going to have to go read his stuff at some point. Vox says none of Steiner's telepathy showed him that Christ is a drug term. I understand liking his books, but the guy's just making shit up. Lol, yeah. Jesse says I did Waldorf education for a couple years. I homeschooled, had no idea what it was until I was older. Hopefully it was good. Brad says spooky action at a distance, yo. Giggity. Okay. We're going to have to do a video on this, but I'm going to need to do some research. So Damlin Marduk says, any thought on Alice Bailey's work? I enjoyed her books about the rays and roots much more and the Theosophical Society. Yeah, this is a bit of a live wire. So Alice Bailey is a cult group. Alice Bailey was a Theosophist who not only Christianized the material, but also intentionally used it as a way to disseminate international socialism. And she has an occult group called Lucis Trust, which sounds like Lucifer, which is still going, and has a meditation room in the United Nations. What's that about? I don't know. But Alice Bailey, yeah, that's a deep dive. That's a deep dive. I'm going to have to think about that. That could be a gory one. We should at least do you know what I'm going to do? Instead of just looking at her books, I should do an Alice Bailey socialism video. She's a damn communist. Commie propaganda. Can't have that? Okay. But yeah, there's probably some useful stuff in there, but you know how it is. You got to take the good and leave the bad. Bach says later on it gets made into a philosophy or a cult, but at first that's what it was, and none of these psychic theosophists, or you're talking about Steiner, none of these psychic theosophists could ever tell us that because they don't go back to sources or do Greek. Interesting. Amon Hillman. Yes, I'm reading from Sane Occultism by Dion Fortune. Jesse went to Pythagoras' cave on Samos while visiting family. Was nice. Definitely a culty cave, though. Why is it culty? Interesting. Ryan's a huge fan of language. Great, you should be. Etymology is my jam. Yeah. Who is Ammons? I don't know this person either. Ammon and Snap. I don't know who these people are. Oh, okay, let's see. Oh no. Frauder says Alice Bailey has a super fun chapter on the Jewish problem. Ah, man. Okay, well, thanks for the tip. I will look that up for the video. Oh, God. Yeah, opinion discarded at that point. Let's see. Should we do one more chapter? Why not? I'm starting to kind of feel out of it, but this one sounds just like it's going to piss people off. So let's go with this and then we'll be done. Chapter 6. The Use and Abuse of Astrology. Here we go. More sacred cows. Let me say by way of preface that I write neither as an astrologer nor as a skeptic, but as an occultist who recognizes astrology as necessary to the practice of occultism. Occultists have a much different relationship to astrology, where they tend to use horary astrology to time rituals rather than for some to look at charts and things like that. A deep knowledge of astrology can only be the fruit of lifelong study and experience, but everyone who aspires to the practice of the occult arts needs to know the principles of astrological science, although, if he be unable to give time to the detailed study that it requires for its proper mastery, he may be wise to consult an astrologer for guidance, rather than trust to a half-knowledge which is no less misleading in astrology than in other technical matters. Whether we are conscious of it or not, we are all the time reacting to the zodiacal and planetary influences which are playing upon the Earth. And our reaction is being determined by the relative proportions of the different elements in our psychic constitution. We need to know not only the general influences affecting mundane conditions, but how we ourselves are likely to be affected by them. For this purpose, both a natal and progressed horoscope are necessary, but these horoscopes must be drawn up not by the average professional astrologer, but by one who approaches the subject from its esoteric aspect and gives the information which is needed by a follower of the path, instead of the usual advice concerning mundane affairs, useful as this may be, if accurate. If we consider, as Solomon bade us, the way of a ship in the sea, we shall obtain enlightenment concerning the problem of astrological influence upon our lives. In the most primitive type of sailing vessel, a mat was hoisted on a pole to enable it to take advantage of the force of the wind. A craft so rigged could only drive before the wind. It could not avail itself of a side wind or tack against a headwind. So it is with the unenlightened man. He is at the mercy of the cosmic forces playing about him. The enlightened man, however, is like a boat in which the sails can be trimmed and made to cooperate with the rudder. Between the two, such a craft can avail itself of any breeze in order to make progress towards its destination, and the sailing qualities of a ship are judged in large measure by the closeness with which she can lie to the wind. A clumsy boat has to have the wind pretty nearly astern before she can make much speed, but a well-designed boat will tack almost into the eye of an opposing wind. Excuse me. So it is with the unenlightened man. He is at the mercy of the cosmic forces. Oh wait, I read this. Okay. So it is with the enlightened man. He will make use of the opposing forces of the stars in order to advance his evolution, and by his skillful sailing, turn an opposing influence into a cooperating one. If he knows that there is a strong destructive influence abroad at a certain time, he will not, if he can help it, start any constructive work. If, on the other hand, he has before him the task of exposing and clearing up evil, he will choose that particular season for his operations. Thus, he will have the cosmic influences with him instead of against him. The occultist needs to know the set of the cosmic tides in order that he may lay his course accordingly, and it is in this that the astrologer can help him. He does not, however, abandon himself to the drift of the tides, but takes them into his calculation and allows for their influence. The planetary forces do not operate in the sphere of external circumstances alone, but affect our lives by stimulating or neutralizing the different traits in our natures. If we consider our lives in the light of our horoscopes, we shall see how much of our fate was brought about by our own actions and reactions. Our rashness may have precipitated quarrels attributed to the influence of Mars. Our emotions may have stirred up certain happenings of the sphere of Venus. We ourselves were the instruments of the stars. From these observations, we derive much illumination in our dealings with the planets. It may not be in our power to command external influences, but it is well within the power of the trained will and disciplined nature, guided by knowledge, to neutralize the greater part, if not all of their effects. The macrocosm of the universe is ordered by God, but of the microcosm of his own nature man should aim to make himself the deity. Ye shall be as gods, said the serpent, and he spoke the truth. Initiation develops the God within so that he may rule the microcosm of our nature instead of leaving it the prey of chaos and old night, the subconscious past of the race. The natal horoscope can be used to read the karma which a soul has to work out in its present incarnation. And so, yeah, this is a key distinction. The normies tend to look at astrology as if they are being controlled by the stars and everything's already written in the stars. Whereas the occultist looks at astrology as a problem to be solved, meaning the astrological chart shows the patterning you came in with that you're going to have to work with and ultimately clear. The natal horoscope can be used to read the karma which a soul has to work out in its present incarnation, and we can see by studying it that certain problems are going to beset a soul, and that certain favorable influences will aid it on its way. We know, if we are occultists, that these conditions have their roots in past actions. We therefore, this is getting deep, we therefore regard the natal horoscope as the result of forces set going in the past, and we approach the astrological problems of a life from the standpoint of karma, as forces to be neutralized by reaction and realization. That's very, very distinctly put. That's great. Let me read that again. This perfectly outlines the difference of use of astrology between occultists and normies. We know, if we are occultists, that these conditions have their roots in past actions. We therefore regard the natal horoscope as the result of forces set going in the past. And just to underline this concept, we therefore regard the natal horoscope as the result of forces set going in the past, and we approach the astrological problems of a life from the standpoint of karma as forces to be neutralized by reaction and realization. We do not, therefore, regard malefic planets as enemies, but as agents of karma, and we try to win from them enlightenment, realization, and discipline. The part played by Saturn in initiations is not sufficiently understood. Absolutely. Okay, just to underline that point. The initiate is not blindly driven by his karma. He consciously cooperates with it for its working out. He knows that the planetary influences will cause his nature to react in a particular way. And he throws his trained and disciplined will, reinforced if possible, by magical ceremonies, into the scale. And thereby counterbalances the cosmic forces operating within his own microcosm. We cannot influence the macrocosmic influences, but discipline and knowledge can profoundly modify the microcosmic reactions of our own inner world. Yeah, so don't let the stars rule you, rule your stars. We can so discipline the martial element in ourselves that it will not react to the stimulation of the planet Mars and lead us into quarrels and disputes. A soft answer turneth away the wrath even of a planetary spirit. On the other hand, a disciplined fighting quality, thus brought under the control of the will, is available at the bidding of the will, even when there is no stimulus forthcoming from the planet of its affinity, and it can then be used to counteract the influence of a planet of inertia, such as Saturn. Thus does the adept balance the cosmic forces one against the other and use his trained will to turn the scale. Yeah, this is high stuff. He also knows how to reinforce his will by linking up with the corresponding cosmic forces, and a large section of ritual magic is devoted to this process. It is for this purpose that the construction of talismans is undertaken. A talisman is a focusing point for force of a particular type, and all the processes of its manufacture are designed to that end. This is why it is so much better to make your own talismans than to have them made for you. Yeah, definitely true. The effect of a talisman is not upon external fate, but upon the internal reactions of consciousness. That's critical to understand. And this is true about magic as a whole, right? So this sentence is key to understanding what magic actually is. The effect of a talisman is not upon external fate, but upon the internal reactions of consciousness. There you have it. We do not affect fate by our magical operations. We affect ourselves. We do not affect fate. Wait for it. We do not affect fate by our magical operations. We affect ourselves. We reinforce those aspects of our nature which are in sympathy with the powers we invoke. Both astrology and the art of making talismans were the guarded secrets of the mysteries. They were a part of a sacred science which was never permitted to be abused by the profane. But knowledge, especially such as can be used for gain, is as hard to confine as a subtle gas, and these branches of the occult art have been debased to the uses of fortune-telling and superstition. Yeah, this is what I was talking about earlier. Occultism itself has no more to do with superstition than has medicine with the use of toads to cure warts. Superstition is the tribute paid by ignorance to knowledge of which it recognizes the value, but does not understand the significance. No one deplores more than the occultist the soul-destroying abuse of the occult arts. Yeah, for sure. There is nothing so destructive of a sound judgment or so paralyzing to self-confidence. Yeah, y'all making us look bad. Don't do that. There's nothing so destructive of a sound judgment or so paralyzing to self-confidence and willpower as the habit of consulting fortune tellers of whatever kind. This is true, and the reason is, and I've seen this because I've worked at psychic companies, going to trance mediums, this is just an important point, going to trance mediums, psychics, channels, stuff like that to get information can become addicting, and I've seen people run up $100,000 credit card bills on psychics and have to be cut off by the company. And the most pernicious thing about that is you're ceding power over your life to someone else. As well-meaning, they may be as totally well-meaning, but you're still looking for answers outside yourself. And at its extreme, that can lead to a type of paralysis where people are unable to do anything without consulting a fortune teller. And that's bad. That's really bad. That's a submission of will. It's the same when you can't do anything without consulting the I Ching or something like that, but at least that's not as expensive. Neither is the uninitiated soothsayer a very reliable source of information. Also true. I mean, if they're not an initiate, then all bets are off. All divination ought to be conducted under the guidance of the divinity presiding over the particular operation undertaken. This ruling genius is contacted with appropriate invocations and the drawing of the correct sigils at the head of the paper on which the calculation is worked out. Yeah, this is Golden Dawn gear. These methods are never used outside the lodges of the greater mysteries. Therefore, it will be readily seen that the rule of thumb methods of uninitiated soothsayers are not likely to penetrate very deeply into the cosmic secrets. The divination of the future by one who is in a position to make proper use of the information thus obtained is one thing, but a similar investigation by another, unequipped in any way to profit by the task, is on a different basis and productive of far more harm than good. There are people who go to psychics and astrologers. Yeah, this I've seen, like, again, like, this is, I've seen all this with my own eyes now at this point. I have a rather large and vast practical experience of the occult at this point. There are people who go to psychics and astrologers as the hypochondriac goes to doctors and patent medicine vendors. Absolutely. It is a very unwholesome and harmful thing to do and productive of sickness of the soul. I agree with that. Although it can certainly be tempting in a crisis, right? But it's not a good thing to do. The power of autosuggestion is enormous, and unless we have the training and knowledge necessary to enable us to use astrological information as a chart that enables us to avoid rocks, it is far better for our peace of mind to be without that information. Yeah, that I agree with that. I tend to ignore it completely. The initiate, who is the only person who really has the right to this knowledge, knows that by its means he can neutralize or deflect the forces thus revealed to him. The untrained man is very apt to think that he is the helpless victim of fate. Did the revelations of astrology stimulate him to greater efforts? They would serve a useful purpose, but how often is this the case? How much oftener do we see their findings used as an excuse for laissez-faire? Yeah, also true. Also true, meaning doing nothing. I have no love, or just doing whatever you want. Excuse me, it's doing whatever you want. Because people also tend to go to psychics to get some type of external, like, stamp of approval on something they were going to do anyways, which is no stamp of approval. It's just somebody's opinion. All that a psychic reading is somebody's opinion. I have no love for miscellaneous divinations by irresponsible people. I love that sentence. I have no love for miscellaneous divinations by irresponsible people. I strive to just be able to drop that into conversation, that type of thing. I think they do much more harm than good. They are on a par with the reading of medical literature by the laity. Yeah, they are on a par with the reading of medical literature by the laity. A divination should be undertaken solely in relation to spiritual development, after prayer and purification. It should be done under the instruction of the initiator responsible for the training of the pupil, who should explain to his pupil the spiritual and karmic signification of his chart, and show him the methods and meditations that counterbalance adverse planetary influences and the disciplines which shall enable him to turn his fate into his initiation. And then her next chapter is on past lives. All right, it's 11:20. I've been going strong here. Let's check out comments, and then we're gonna be done. Caves just feel culty. Alice Henry Ford Bailey. Oh man. Wow, all these people, this is so wild. All these people have been to the caves in Sarnos. Yay. Tell you what, as I'm reading comments, if I get at least $10 in super chats, I'll read another chapter, but otherwise you'll have to wait. Adam Cadmon, this reminds me of Kant's idea of enlightenment. Alex drinks everything in the house. Whoa there. Jesse asks, who would win a psychic backyard mud wrestling match, Plato or Aristotle? Well, Plato was the teacher, whereas Aristotle was the student. So, but Aristotle's student was Alexander the Great, who conquered the known world, so. Vox says Plato is built like a Dagestani, so my money's on the Plato, on the plate, bro. What is, okay. If Aristotle is Dagestani, Plato is the bear he trained with. They both had to be pretty ripped. They just hang out and work out and talk. Yes, Plato all the way with the body slams for real. Chat going insane. Jupiter equals infinite cardio. Saturn equals infinite leg kicks. Jason, Mormon cartoons, reaction video. Are there Mormon cartoons? Uranus keeps giving me the stink eye. Talking about black cube. Okay, I'm going to get off. I'm done. Let me know in the comments if you want me to continue reading this on other... Oh,